Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training we're going to be going over the step-by-step instructions to how you are going to be delivering the practice strategy session, exactly what a strategy session even is, how does it even work, what is the step-by-step in order to make sure that we do it successfully. We're going to go ahead and talk about all of that inside of this training, so let's go ahead and hop right in. Of course, we are continuing our theme of putting your transformation program together inside of this module. Now, the big thing to know here is that the goal of this training is to really give you a quick overview in regards to what a strategy session is and how to be able to conduct the strategy session for the purposes of your practice calls. The purpose of this training is not to be the complete guide to all things related to sales or to strategy sessions. In fact, there is going to be an entire module, we're talking about 10 plus trainings that are specifically going to be focusing on how to be able to help you become a master in things like influence, persuasion, sales, the psychology of the mind, so that way you can go ahead and understand the psychology behind influence, persuasion, and sales, right? And so all of that cannot be delivered in just one training. And so really the theme of what it is that we are doing here in module number 5 is we're really helping you find your voice and facilitating that process of helping you find your voice. And so that is why we're going to be sticking with that theme. And so a lot of what it is that we talk about is only for the purposes of the overview. So that way you can actually do the practice call. And then that way, once it's time to go ahead and hone your skills for the strategy session, there is going to be an entirely different module for that. Okay. So I did want to go ahead and point that out right from the beginning of this training. Okay. So of course, as always, we do have our training outline available for you, as well as the outline in the Google Doc. And then from there, let's go ahead and answer the $1 million question, which is, what the heck is a strategy session? It's a phenomenal question. So a strategy session is a 45 to 60 minute call where what you do is you actually listen to the problems of the prospect. And so if you don't know what a prospect is basically just a potential student or a potential client. And so what we're doing is that inside of that 45 to 60 minute call, what we're doing is we're determining if they would be a good fit for our transformation program, as well as the problem that we solve, and if they would be a good fit for that. And then if they are a good fit for our program and the problem that we solve, then at the end of that call, at the end of the strategy session, we would offer to open a slot for them to come and work with us, okay? And so learning to be able to deliver an effective strategy session is one of the most, if not the most important skills that a remote wellness practitioner can learn, okay? And so there are 3 main goals for an effective strategy session. Goal number 1 is to uncover where the potential student, where the prospect is right now in terms of their health, in terms of their wealth, in terms of their relationships, in terms of their connection to something greater, in terms of their life, right? Insert whatever area of life that they want to be able to have transformation in. Now, obviously, right now, as you already know, because we've already touched on it many times, is you're primarily focusing on health right now. But I want to go ahead and leave that open so that way you understand that these frameworks that we're talking about really are universal and are able to be adapted for every single transformation that is needed. Okay, so that's the first goal, and that is being able to uncover the current situation. Okay, then the second goal is uncovering where they want to be instead of their current situation, and that's of course, their desired situation. And then the third goal is to be able to uncover what is the best possible path for them to be able to go from where they are right now to where they want to go. What is that bridge in order to be able to bridge that gap, right? Is it through your transformation program, or is that going to be through somewhere else? Now, if this is sounding or looking familiar, you're right, because this is exactly what we talk about when we talk about the becoming process, and we talk about identifying, hey, what's your current situation? What's your desired situation? And then what is the path that is going to be required in order for you to be able to get there? And so you're going to see that the entire psychology of influence and persuasion and sales and strategy session really mimics a lot of what it is that you already know. And so there's going to be a lot of aha moments and a lot of things that you're going to start to realize throughout this entire process, okay? So from there, one of the main questions that I want to go ahead and answer here is, how is a strategy session different from a typical sales call? Okay, so a strategy session is different from what most beginners would in their head think of a sales call, because of the fact that it's actually a diagnostic process. Okay, so what is a diagnostic process? Well, a diagnostic process, you can think of it like a doctor when they diagnose a patient. Now, obviously, remember, scope of practice here, we are not medical professionals, and so we're not diagnosing or prescribing a patient, but it's just an example here. And so if you remember what a doctor does when they diagnose a patient, they ask a bunch of questions to better understand, right? And so this is what a diagnostic process is, okay? And so because of the fact that it is a diagnostic process, there are two big differences that I want to go ahead and highlight between what most people think of as like, hey, this is what sales is, compared to a strategy session, okay? So the first important difference here is deciding if it's a good fit, right? Matching alignment. And so most people think that the goal of sales is to sell every single person that speaks with us, okay? However, in a strategy session, we don't know if the person that we're speaking to is actually going to be a good fit for the program or not. And so what we're doing is we're genuinely curious on the call when we're doing the strategy session. We're genuinely curious about the person, and we want to learn more about them to see if there's an alignment with their problems and the transformation that they want to have in their life. And so what that means is that we're not just going to be bringing on everyone, right? We want to make sure that those people who join the program are the people that we can actually help and are the people that we actually want to work with, okay? And so this is why we use a lot of conscious listening, a lot of curious exploration on these calls, as you're going to see when we get to the script portion of this specific training, okay? And so this is also the reason why your program is considered a premium program, because this is not like a gym membership, and this is not just like, hey, you just walk into a restaurant, or this is not like, hey, you want to go ahead and serve everyone. The truth is that you do not work with everyone. You work with the people that are the best fit for your program. And so that means that you will be turning people away who could be potential students, but they are not the best fit for the problem that you solve and the program that you actually deliver, the transformation that you deliver, right? And so this is how you actually stay ethical and true to what is actually in the best interest of the person that you are speaking to, okay? This is how you actually make it so, hey, I don't need you to join my program. I don't need the sale, right? So it prevents you from being what we call commission breath, right? It's not that you are money hungry. You are doing what is in the best interest of the person that you're speaking with. And you're going to see that as a common theme as we go ahead and talk about exactly how strategy sessions are delivered, okay? So that is the first important piece to understand about what a diagnostic process is. The second very important piece to understand about this is that a diagnostic process is really all about helping the person that we are talking to make a decision and take action. So once someone is determined to be a good fit, even then, we don't actually look for that person to say yes to joining the program, right? So first we're determining, hey, is this person a good fit? But then even when they are determined, hey, this is a good fit for the program, right? Even then, we're not looking for them to say yes in order to buy our program. This is the second big difference between a strategy session and what most people think sales actually is. Because in a strategy session, all we're doing is we're helping someone be able to make a decision and take action, regardless of if that decision is a yes or a no, right? Because here's the thing, having someone say no to joining your program is actually welcomed. What? Mind blown. I know. Why is that the case? Because here's the truth. The most harmful thing that any human being can actually go through is having indecision and not taking action, right? That's actually more harmful than somebody saying, you know what, this is not for me, right? And so the goal of our strategy session isn't to try and push every single person to buy or join our program. What we're doing is we're designing this entire process around helping the person make a decision to take action, regardless of whether that is working with us, regardless if that is working on their own, regardless if that's somebody who's going to work with somebody else, right? It doesn't matter. What we're doing is we're helping the person get clarity around where they want to go, why they are stuck, so that way they can actually take action, right? And so that is ultimately some of the biggest differences that you're going to find in regards to the diagnostic process. Now, those aren't the only two differences that exist, but those are two of the big ones that I did want to go ahead and highlight, so that way you can understand some of the big differences and what exactly a diagnostic process is. And you're going to see that as a theme throughout the rest of this training as well. Now, the other important point that I do want to go ahead and address here very importantly is really the difference between sales and a strategy session. Are they the same? Like, what is sales in the first place? Now, this is a question that we are actually going to have an entire module dedicated to called the game of sales, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to actually touch on it very briefly over here. Now, this is also going to be another phrase that you're going to see consistently throughout this entire training. That's why I went ahead and highlighted it from the very beginning of this training. You're going to see, hey, don't worry, we're going to talk about this in the module called the game of sales. Don't worry, we're going to talk about this in the module called the game of sales. Don't worry, we're going to talk about this in the module called the game of sales. You're going to see that as a consistent theme. And the reason we're repeating that over and over and over again is because I want to provide you the reassurance that any other open-ended questions that you might have were purposely left out of this training so that we could go ahead and expand on it in the upcoming module. Okay, so that's what's going to be another recurring theme that you are going to go ahead and see. But let's go ahead and address this question very briefly about, hey, what the heck even is sales, right? Is strategy session sales? Like, what's going on here, right? And so the truth is that most beginners who start to make an income, what they do is they actually have a lot of negative resistance around the word sales or the concept of sales or even the word sales call, right? What they think is, you know what? I want nothing to do with sales. I'm not a salesperson. I don't like sales, When the truth is that they themselves, if you ask them, unfortunately, sometimes those students, I call them wearing the failure uniform, is because if you actually ask them, hey, do you even understand what sales is? Have you ever actually studied sales? Do you know what sales actually entails, right? What they think is that their understanding of sales is, oh, high pressure environment where I got to push people to make decisions, even if it's not something that they want to do, or even if it's not something that's in their best interest. And I got to take money from them. I got to be money hungry, right? And so the truth is that this could not be any further from the truth, okay? And so this is why it's so important right now to take a second to be able to highlight the difference between what people consider sales in their head versus a strategy session and what sales actually is, right? Because if I just got on here and I said, cool, let's go ahead and deliver the strategy session, this is the script and that's it, you're going to see that a lot of this entire training, probably over half of it, is going to be breaking down to you the psychology, the principles, and the tactics. So that way, when you get the script, you're not just going out there and following blindly. Remember, I've said this a gazillion and 2 times. We want you to be a remote wellness practitioner, but we don't want you to be a remote control student. We want you to be able to understand the principles behind this so that way you can go out there and implement it on your own for the rest of your life. We don't want you to be stuck to our hip for the rest of your life, okay? We want you to be able to learn these principles and go out there and be resourceful and creative so that way you can be successful even without us, okay? And so here's the truth. Unfortunately, the word sales in today's world has been turned into a dirty word, okay? But the thing is that sales, just like every other subject, just like every other body of knowledge, has many different types. And so just because some students, some people who wear the failure uniform many times have experienced uncomfortable feelings with a type of sales does not mean that all sales are exactly the same way. Because the thing is that at its core, sales is really all about persuasion, influence, clarity, commitment, conviction, action, coaching, understanding, listening, asking questions. And so the truth is that in life, nothing good happens if sales is not a part of the equation. I know for some of you, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow, but hear me out on this, okay? Because if you have a significant other, or if you are married, or if you are in a relationship, well, guess what? Not only did you get sold, but you also did a bit of selling in order to be able to get married or have a significant other, okay? Do you got kids? Well, guess what? You're probably practicing sales on a daily basis, right? You are selling all the time, selling the kids to go to bed, selling the kids on eating dinner, selling the kids to not pee all over the living room, right? You're selling all the time, right? Have you ever shared a movie or TV show that you love, right? You ever convinced a friend that, hey, you gotta watch this TV show. You gotta watch this movie. It was an amazing, amazing movie. Well, guess what? That's sales. And so the truth is, and this is why I'm trying to break the belief for many of you who may have a negative connotation when it actually comes to sales. The truth is that no exchange of value between human beings can happen without sales. No human being will ever take anything seriously unless they are sold on it first. And so this is why you'll see that a lot of the coaching elements that we're going to be talking about that you've learned in previous modules are going to be involved with sales as well. There's elements of building trust. There's elements of building relationships. There's elements of solving people's problems. And so we're going to go through a lot more in depth when we get to the game of sales module, but that's why we're breaking some of those beliefs right now so you can actually go through the practice strategy session. Because once you learn about what sales actually is, you'll see that if it's done right, Sales is actually one of the most noble professions that can exist. Selling is serving. Selling is the first step to true coaching. Selling is the first step to true transformation. Selling is what gets someone to be able to make a decision in order to actually change their life. Selling is helping someone get out of their own way so that way they can finally make the decision to transform their life. And so yes, the strategy session is a type of sales, but not the type of sales that beginners think of and are so afraid of, okay? Does that make sense? Very, very, very important to understand, because if you have limiting beliefs that need to be broken around this, it is paramount. It is critical to make sure that we are working on this, because you will not be able to actually transform the life of anybody in your life or your future students or your future clients or really anyone in your entire journey as a remote wellness practitioner until you start being able to break these beliefs and rewire the character statements and the identity statements that you have around this. And so if you need help with this, make sure that you are masterminding with other RWA students. We have some amazing people with amazing backgrounds in sales in the Remote Wellness Academy. And so if this is something that you struggle with, make sure that you are masterminding, you're hopping on the office hours, and just making sure that overall you are demolishing any false beliefs that you might have in regards to what sales actually is. Beautiful. Now, on that note, I do want to go ahead and answer two other quick questions that come up in regards to what a strategy session is, which is number one, are there other names for strategy session? As well as number two, is the strategy session free? Is it something that we pay for? Let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So number one, other names for strategy session. So a strategy session is actually known by many, many, many different words and many different names in the industry. In fact, there is an entire art when it comes to naming and describing your strategy session in order to make it more exciting for your prospect to show up on the call. And so we've gone ahead and just compiled just some general terms that we've seen in the industry over the last decade or so. It's kind of like usually a combination of a first word and a second word. So it's kind of like, okay, you know what? This is going to be a qualification meeting. This is going to be an assessment session. This is going to be a breakthrough session. This is going to be a blueprint meeting. This is going to be a clarity call. This is going to be a transformation session. This is going to be a discovery session, right? So it's usually a combination of using the first word combined with the second word. And then honestly, you're going to see so many different ways as well. There are just many, many, many words. I just want you to be familiar as an RWA student that when you see this, you're not confused and be like, oh, this person calls it like a blueprint session, right? Is that the same as a strategy session? Most likely, yes, right? And so for the sake of this training and for the sake of the practice call, we're just going to stick to the terminology around strategy session. However, we will talk more about how to be able to change the name and the description in the future as well. The second point that I do want to go ahead and highlight here as we go ahead and wrap up this section about what a strategy session is the strategy session free? So yes, strategy sessions normally are free, and there are some people in the industry who like to charge for them. However, we have never done this and we have not been fans of that. Why? Because really, when you talk about the strategy session, it's the first time that someone is coming into contact with you, coming into contact with your organization, coming into contact with the problem that you solve. And so basically what they're doing is they're coming to you and saying, is this something that is right for me or not? And so when you charge them, what's going to happen is that you're going to have a very, very big drop off in terms of the number of conversations that you actually have. And so in fact, you want the opposite. You actually want to try and have as many conversations with people via strategy sessions as possible. And so if charging for them actually lowers the amount of conversations that you have, that's not something that you want to do. And that's typically what we have gone ahead and seen, is that if you have to charge for them, then people are not going to want to schedule them, okay? But the more conversations you have, the higher chance you have of finding somebody who is a good fit for your program, okay? And then when they join your program, that's when they're going to have access to the coaching calls, which is what they actually paid for, okay? So that is another quick question that I did want to go ahead and address when we actually start talking about what a strategy session is, so that way you have a complete understanding, a 360 understanding of exactly what the ins and outs of a strategy session are and exactly how it relates to sales as well. From there, the next point that we want to go ahead and jump into, now that we understand what a strategy session is really talking about why is a strategy session important. Now, I know we've gone ahead and highlighted it briefly just now, but we're going to go ahead and really dive deep on why a strategy session is so important, because you might be quick to go ahead and dismiss it. You might say, you know what, I got to do my coaching calls. That's really what's going to provide the transformation for the student. I guess I just got to do the strategy session thingamajig in order to be able to collect the money. I'm telling you, the transformation for the student starts in the strategy session, and that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and cover inside of this section of this training right now. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Why is a strategy session even important in the first place? So my first question to you in order to answer this question is, do you remember how old the human brain and body is, right? The answer is over 200,000 years old, right? We've talked about this in the past. And so the human brain and body was actually designed for a very different time from the one that we live in now. And so a time when energy and survival were actually the most important things to focus on. And so because of that, the human brain and body is literally built from the inside out to do one thing and one thing only. And that is to be able to conserve energy. What is that? It's to conserve energy, okay? And so the human brain and body actually hates using energy unless it has to. Why? Because energy, in its opinion, is the most important resource on the planet, right? The human brain and body, because it was designed for a time over 200,000 years ago, it does not know that we now live in a time that there are refrigerators and pantries full of unlimited energy, right? And so this is the reason why we as humans, we hate change, and the reason why we hate taking action. Why? Because it uses energy. And so our human brain and our human body actually fights this, right? And so this is why success is so difficult for us as human beings, because it requires for us to override our default programming and use energy in order to be able to create a life for ourselves in the modern world. And so our brain and body doesn't care about us actually having a successful life in today's world, right? What it wants to do is it just wants to conserve energy and stay alive. Why? Because for your brain and body, that is what success was over 200,000 years ago, right? Being able to conserve the energy and stay alive, that is what it is optimizing for, because that is ultimately what success looks like for it. Because your brain and body is like, yo, if we run out of energy and we die, it doesn't matter if you want to get fit. It doesn't matter if you want to make money. It doesn't matter if you want to have a healthy relationship. It doesn't matter if you want to have a purpose in your life. That doesn't matter. What is actually number one and what is actually paramount is making sure that we have enough energy to live. And so this is the reason why our comfort zone is actually even a thing, because leaving the comfort zone requires energy. It's not something that our brain and body wants to use. And so this is why when we talk about all of those epic quotes that we went through, right? Hey, current comfort zone equals no growth, right? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. If you want something you have never had, you have to become someone that you've never been, think of things that you never have done, and do things you've never done, right? All of these quotes, why are these images? Why are these motivational things? Why are they even a thing? Why is it that human beings have such a difficult time leaving their comfort zone, really being able to grow, really being able to change, really being able to become, really being able to transform? Why is that the case? The reason it's the case is because our human brain and our body doesn't want to utilize the energy that is required for us to be able to grow. Because when you expand, you expend. And guess what? Expending doesn't feel good because the human brain and body is wired to make sure that when you expend energy, it doesn't feel good because of the fact that it's a valuable resource. Again, remember, the human brain and body doesn't know that refrigerators and pantries are full of unlimited energy in today's world. It just doesn't know that. And so everything the brain and body is doing is optimizing to be able to conserve energy. Now, real quick side note on this, the only exception to this rule is when it comes to procreation, aka sex, but that's a whole different topic. I'm not even going to get into it of why that's actually the case. But for the most part, 99% of cases, conserving energy is what is most paramount. Okay, now you might be saying, Coach Yasin, what in the world does any of this have to even do with sales and strategy session? Like, cool, I get it. Thank you very much for the important lesson about our brain and body. But what does this have to do with strategy session and sales? Well, guess what? This is actually the reason why sales and strategy sessions are so important. Because without sales, without the strategy session, there is no reason for the human mind to be convinced to use some of its precious energy towards something. Because unless someone is sold on an idea, they have no reason to take it seriously. And so what that means is that sales, the strategy session, is the first step to actually helping someone transform their life. Without the strategy session, none of the amazing transformational work that we are going to be doing inside of our program can actually happen. The strategy session is the spark that gets the ball rolling with everything else. The strategy session is the process that actually uncovers the potential student's reasons for being stuck, their why underneath the why, their reasons for wanting to take action. It's what allows the student to be able to get out of their own way so that way they can actually change their life, okay? The strategy session is what gets the potential student to get emotional about what it is that they want in life so that way they can actually leave mediocrity. They can leave complacency and actually take that step towards changing their life. Now, you might say, why is it so important to get a student emotional? Why does that even matter? The reason it's important is because number one, emotions are the energy for overcoming obstacles. Emotion fuels that motivation. If you think back to any change that you have made in your life, it's only when you got in tune with your feelings to overcome those obstacles were you actually able to do it. It's the emotion that allows you to be able to overcome the fear, the challenges, the resistance. Because without the strategy session, none of that is possible because you never connected the logical decision of being able to transform their life. They know that logically, but emotionally they're not yet there yet. And the strategy session is what facilitates that. Okay. And then number two, the reason is because human beings change because of emotions and then justify with logic. People buy based on emotion, not logic. They use the logic to justify their emotions after the fact. Okay. If you think about really the reason why you've ever wanted anything, it's because you were chasing some sort of feeling, right? The person who actually buys a Ferrari, or the person who actually buys a nice house, or the person who actually buys, whatever, they do it because they want to chase some sort of feeling, and then they justify it. They give the reasons for it with their logic. And so if you don't get the emotions of the potential student involved, they will not be able to make a decision to actually buy and change their life. Okay. And so the bottom line of this is that this is why learning how to deliver an effective strategy session is one of, if not the most important skills that an RWP can learn. Because if you truly want to help someone and transform their life, you must learn the skill of strategy sessions, of sales, of influence, the persuasion, the psychology behind all of these things. Because without this skill, you will be unable to help anyone overcome their brains and body's default programming to conserve energy. They will not actually take it important. If they don't take it important, then guess what? They're not actually going to take the actions that are necessary, okay? So without this skill, you will never be able to help someone leave their comfort zone and take the action that is needed to be able to change their life forever. Without this skill, you will not be able to help anyone actually overcome all of those things that we're talking about when we talk about leaving your comfort zone and all of the growth that happens around that. Okay, so with the strategy session, what's happening is that you are empowering the potential student to get out of their own way and say yes to all of the changes that are going to happen and occur when they actually decide to transform their life. And so this is the reason why it really is one of the most important, if not the most important skill that an RWP can learn. Now, on that note, I do want to go ahead and kind of do a side note here. And if you really want to have your mind blown, I want you to kind of think about this. Is that, remember we talked about self-coaching and all of the skills around coaching could be used on yourself as well as kind of like this meta way to think about it, right? Well, what about self-sales, right? Because if you are going to learn how to be able to influence and persuade others, well, that means that you're actually being able to learn the psychology behind selling yourself and being able to get out of your own way and being able to help override the brain and body's default response that is related to you. And so by learning all of this, you can actually learn to use this on yourself as well. Just a quick side note, I'm not going to go into it too much, but I did just want to go ahead and point that out as well. And so sales is extremely multidimensional, not only when you're going ahead and selling your transformation program, not only around the psychology of convincing yourself, but this is going to start to illuminate and really help you in every area of your life as well. Because like we said, coaching is one of those skills that touches on so many aspects of life. There is no area of life that does not involve coaching, just like we learned in the past. In the same way, there is no area of life that does not involve sales as well. And that is exactly some of the extra benefits that happen as you go through this process of becoming a remote wellness practitioner and really becoming the best coach and salesperson that you can be. The rest of your life gets better as well. Okay. So on that note, as you're starting to realize exactly what a strategy session is, exactly what sales entails, well, there are some questions that might start to come up that you might start to feel right now, right? And so this is where I want to go ahead and talk about the recurring theme that you are going to hear us as coaches repeat to you over and over and over again. This is what we call the nail in the coffin, okay? Because here's the thing. For many students, this is going to be extremely difficult to hear what I'm about to say right now. But the truth is, and I'm going to say this very clearly to you, okay? You will most likely not be good at this in the beginning. This entire thing that we're talking about, the importance of it, the most important skill that an RWP has, all this kind of stuff. Guess what? You're most likely not going to be good at this in the beginning. But remember, we talked about the power of I am identity statements. And so the better way to be able to phrase what it is that we just said is that you will most likely not be good at being able to deliver a strategy session. You will most likely not be good at sales and persuasion and influence. But here's the thing. Yet, and that's okay because you're going to be putting in the reps in order to get better at it, okay? And like I said, unfortunately, this is something that is extremely difficult for beginner RWPs to actually accept because yes, it does sting when you speak to someone and they are a good fit for your program and they don't actually join. I'm going to be straightforward with you. I'm going to be honest with you. It does sting, especially in the beginning when you're getting started with this because you haven't yet cultivated the right mindset around being able to help somebody make a decision, right? But all this means is that you just have more work to do in being able to get better at delivering the strategy session. You just have more work to do in getting better at the skill of influence and persuasion. You just have to put in more reps to get better at your ability to convince people to take action and take the steps in order to change their life, okay? So instead of beating yourself up, I would highly recommend that you drop the expectation and disappointment that I should be good at this, even though I've never actually done it, right? Remember, we talked about the word should and how it implies judgment and cleaning that out of your vocabulary. And so assuming that you will be great at something when you've barely done it before and then being upset when you aren't that great at it because you just did it for the first time, I'm sorry to say, but that's crazy people thinking. Now, I know we don't think of it as crazy people thinking, right? When we actually are doing it, we're like, oh, it seems logical, right? Why am I not good at this? I'm upset that I'm not good at this. But guess what? If you actually take a step back and you observe what it is that you're saying and what it is that you're thinking, you'll be like, wow, that really is crazy people thinking, okay? So instead, what you're going to do is you're walking in expecting that you're probably not going to be great at it. And guess what? That's okay, because that's how you set yourself up for success, because that's why we're providing you the scripting and the training wheels that are going to allow you to get in the reps, the done for you, do it yourself approach, because that's how you're going to start, okay? It's not going to sound like you in the beginning. It's going to sound awkward. And that is exactly how you practice the framework. You practice the script over and over and over again, at least 10 times. And you're going to start to realize that it's starting to feel more and more like you. Just like the coaching calls and how they felt awkward for you in the beginning, learning to be able to deliver the coaching calls was one skill set, and this is going to be a similar skill set but slightly different because it involves a little bit of salesmanship, influence, and persuasion. It's a little bit different than a coaching call. Similar, but not exactly the same. But very similarly, you're going to be starting off with unconscious incompetence, and then you're going to quickly, with knowledge and reps, realize that you are consciously incompetent. You now know how terrible you are, because in the beginning when you started off, you didn't know anything about strategy sessions. You said, you know what, maybe I could be good at this, right? But then as you do more reps, you're starting to become conscious of the fact that you are incompetent in this skill. But then as you stick with it, the more knowledge and repetition that you have around it, you start to be able to get to that point of conscious competence. You actually have to use your entire brain in order to actually be competent at it. And then with enough repetition, it starts to become easy for you. You start to be able to do it in your sleep because you've now reached the point of unconscious competence, okay? And so learning to be able to conduct a strategy session that actually converts, okay, that's what we call it, a strategy session that converts. This is what we call a skill. What does it mean when it converts? It means that you have a percentage, a probability that when you speak to a person that is a good fit, what percentage of those people actually take you up on the offer of joining your program, right? That's what it means when it converts. And so guess what? You're only going to continue to get better at that through repetition. And so that's what we call the recurring theme, the nail in the coffin. You're going to hear us repeating this to you over and over and over again. And this is going to be something that, hey, even though I'm telling you right now, you're still going to be disappointed. And that's okay. That's why we are here. You mastermind with other RWA students. You hop on the coaching calls in the office hours and allow us to be able to help you get through this. So that way you don't let your emotional baggage, especially I'm talking about amateur beginner RWPs, when you're starting off in this journey, your emotional baggage, the beating up that you're doing psychologically is what prevents you from being able to get the knowledge and the repetition that is required for you to get to the point of unconscious competence. The emotional baggage prevents you from doing the action that will allow you to be able to get better. And that is the psychological things that beginners struggle with. And that is exactly why you are a part of a program, a part of a community, a part of a mastermind that allows you to be able to break through that emotional baggage so that way you can stick through the difficult parts long enough to be able to actually get good. Okay, so that is what I wanted to go ahead and talk about when we talk about the recurring theme. Now, guess what? What's next? Let's go ahead and talk about what's next. So what we're going to go ahead and do next is enough of the introduction, enough of what it is that we talked about there. What we want to go ahead and do now is actually talk about how to do and how to deliver a successful strategy session. Now, this question, we're actually going to go ahead and tackle it on 3 different fronts. Okay, the very first front that we're going to go ahead and tackle this question on is more of the principle side of things. Okay, the underlying principles that allow for a successful strategy session to occur. Number 1, we're going to go ahead and talk about that. And then number 2, we're going to talk about some of the tactics, the tactical questions in regards to the strategy session. And then finally, we're actually going to get to the actual script around the strategy session so you can see the framework and how all of this actually comes together. So that way you can start doing the practice strategy sessions with your partners and start developing the skill of delivering an effective strategy session. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into the principle section of how to deliver a strategy session. So let's go ahead and talk about that now. So just like any other body of knowledge or industry, there is an art and science to the skills of influence, persuasion, and sales, okay? But the foundation to all of that art and science are the principles, okay? And so we're going to touch on just a few of those principles here in this section, just so that way you get a better understanding of exactly what are the foundations of influence, persuasion, and sales and exactly how they're done, okay? But for the sake of the practice, we are not going to be going over all of the principles behind why this practice script that you're going to be going through is structured the way that it is. There are dozens of other sales principles within the structure that are all going to be broken down in the upcoming module that we talk about with the game of sales, okay? However, it's just important to understand that these principles are what allow for dozens of variations of the actual strategy session script to be made, all based on things like, hey, what is the promise? What's the market? What's the price point? What's the offer? What are the deliverables? All of these different factors are based on these principles. So that way we're actually able to customize and have different versions of the script based on these different principles. Okay, so let's go ahead and quickly mention some of these principles right now. Principle number 1 is helping the student decide, not buy. Okay, this is very important. The mental frame that's very important and helpful to think about this is, hey, I don't want you to buy. I want you to decide for you. Not for me, okay? My life is going to be the same regardless of if you decide to buy or not, okay? This decision that you are making is for you and you alone, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, you, Mr. or Mrs. Potential Student. Now, obviously, this is not a script that you say, but this is the mental frame that you are having as the principal here, okay? You must keep the person's goal that you are talking to at the center of the decision, independent of whether they choose to work with you or not. In fact, you should be happy if the person decides not to work with you. I know it's tough. It's a very tough pill to swallow. Why? Because of the fact that the person made a decision. If they decided not to work with you, they decided no. And guess what? You're happy for that because of the fact that you want to help the student decide, not necessarily buy, okay? And so if you can truly understand this, and if you can truly embody this, then all of the pressure that is around sales disappears and evaporates. Because the question is, did I help them? Did I help them make a decision? And if I did, then I was successful. Because like we talked about, selling is about helping people make a decision to help themselves. It's not about how it's going to serve you. It's all about how it is going to serve them. This is so absolutely critical. And this is the very first foundational principle when we talk about understanding influence and persuasion and sales in the strategy session. This is very important. Helping the student decide, not buy. After that, the second very important principle is that the one who cares the most about the person is the one who wins the sale. If you care about the well-being of your potential student, the potential customer that you are talking about, if you care more about the well-being of them more than they care about themselves, you will win the sale. If you care more and you are more convicted about the value that you provide, the prospect is going to start to question their own excuses because you are so certain. If you've ever been around somebody who is so certain, somebody who has so much conviction conviction, so much belief, so much certainty around what it is that they are saying or believing that it causes you to be able to question yourself. If you have ever been around somebody, then you know what it is that we're talking about, is that it makes you question your own certainty, your own beliefs. That is what it is that we are talking about. When you are so convicted about the value that you provide, about the fact that you will be able to help this person, it makes the person that you are talking to question their own excuses. If you are selling, quote unquote, selling from the right place, then you are doing it not to make the deal, not to make some moolah, not to make some quick cash, okay? But you are doing it to genuinely help the other person. And that, paradoxically, is actually how you get the most sales. And so how you get the most sales, right? The people who are actually commission breath, who are money hungry. This is what we talked about when we talked about all the way in the beginning of your certification. We said that those people who are money hungry, those people who are in make money now mode, actually end up not making the money. Why? Because of the fact that other people can sense it, right? How you actually make the most amount of money, how you make the most amount of sales is actually caring for the person, delivering the most amount of value, because humans are exceptionally good at sniffing out intention. Okay, this is something that we have evolved to be able to do. This is something that we are wired to do because it is a survival mechanism. We want to know if the person that we are talking to can be trusted or not. It is hardwired in us to be able to sniff out intention. And so the reason why a lot of people cannot get sales, the reason why a lot of people can't close, the reason why a lot of people aren't able to bring the person on as a student is because what they are caring about is only about the close. They're only caring about making the money. They're caring about being able to have another student, okay? They're not actually caring about helping the person, okay? And so like we talked about, selling is helping people make a decision to help themselves, okay? And so this is how you make the most amount of sales, not because you care about the sale, but because you actually care about the person. This is the second very important principle that you need to understand when we talk about how to do a strategy session. I can talk to you about the tactics and the scripting and all of that kind of stuff all day long. But here is the truth. If you actually believe, if you actually care, if you are actually certain, if you actually have conviction, it doesn't matter what the scripting and the wording and the sales tactics and all of this kind of stuff is. Because if you ever talk to somebody who actually believes and cares, they might not even be trained classically in sales. However, they are some of the best salesperson that you will ever meet. Why? Because the actual conviction, the actual certainty sells better than any scripting or any tactic or anything like that. Yes, you're going to learn that. But the very first important thing is the principles around understanding the caring, the conviction, and the certainty and the value that you provide. Because if you have that in line, everything else after that is going to go ahead and take care of itself. Okay, so that is principle number 2. Principle number 3 is truly caring means being able to have hard conversations, right? What I always say is that those people who quote unquote say, hey, I love someone, but then they go ahead and enable that person to not be the best version of themselves. I say, no. You don't actually love that person because you're not helping them become better. And so loving somebody, caring about somebody, wanting the best for somebody means that you have to be able to have those hard conversations. Caring for the potential student means asking the hard questions and being okay with them getting uncomfortable, because you know that the short-term uncomfortability that this prospect is going to feel is actually necessary in order for them to be able to make the change. You know that in order to care for this person in the best way possible, it means that they are going to have to stretch outside of their comfort zone. And so if it wasn't outside of their comfort zone, they would already have what it is that they wanted. And so this means that you are going to have to get comfortable calling out your potential student on their excuses, because if you cannot have transformational conversations, you cannot coach, you cannot sell, period. This is very important. This is principle number 3. Principle number 4 is selling the vacation, not the plane flight. You are not selling fill in the blank, coaching calls, sessions per hour. You are not selling your XYZ, right? Whatever it is, what you are selling is you are selling the desired future. This is a quote that I really love. Sell the vacation, not the plane flight. You are selling futures, not features, okay? You are not selling, imagine if you're selling the vacation here, right? You're selling the white sand, you're selling the rainbows, you're selling the sunshine. Feel the white sand and the cool water on your feet. Imagine what it feels like when you've actually arrived. You are not selling, oh, you were going to go ahead and plan for the trip, prepare, pack, don't forget anything, prepare your tickets, go through security, take everything out of your bag, sit next to somebody on the plane that's snoring, have that crying child in the back of the plane, find your bag at pickup, rent a car or take a bus, find your hotel, and all of the other steps that are going to be required in order for them to get to where it is that they want to go. Because remember, when it comes to value and business, people only care about one thing, which is transformation and results. Does this product solve my problem and get me to where I want to go. Of course, everybody understands that there's going to be work involved, but all of that work, all of the action steps, all of the features are going to be something that they get once they actually join the program. But in terms of the actual principle that happens on the strategy session, we are always making sure that we are orienting everything towards selling the vacation, not the plane flight, okay? Whenever you hear somebody who is selling these vacation commercials that are happening, they're not talking to you about all of the uncomfortability of having to get to the vacation. Everybody knows that there's going to be uncomfortability to get to vacation, right? But for the sake of the strategy session, we're always orienting everything around the vacation, the end result, the transformation, okay? And so yes, that does mean that there are going to be plane ride questions that come up, right? Logistical questions that come up. However, we answer those within the frame. The deliverables are answered within the frame of the vacation, okay? And this is going to be an advanced tactic that you are going to learn more about in the Game of Sales module. But this is a very important principle to always understand, is sell the vacation, not the plane flight, okay? That is principle number 4 that I wanted to go ahead and introduce to you, okay? Principle number 5 is a question-based framework. I want you to think about it like a doctor's office, right? You go to the doctor and the doctor just doesn't prescribe you, right? Do you know what happens to the doctor who just prescribes everyone that they see? Well, that's called malpractice, okay? There's literally people who sue for that, okay? And so you need to think of the strategy session kind of like a consultation. It's a diagnostic process, remember? And so when a doctor asks you, hey, how often have you been brushing your teeth? Do you floss? Do you eat sugar? Are you exercising? What time do you go to sleep? All of those kinds of things. They're just asking questions. And then how come when they're asking questions, you all of a sudden start to feel guilty? The reason is because of that diagnostic process. So what we're doing is we're asking questions in a way that the prospect themselves comes to the realization that they need to change, okay? And so it's questions that sell, okay? And so you're going to see this in the script when we talk about this in just a second, that it's literally all just questions. And so it's the questions that are actually doing the selling, okay? So that is going to be principle number 5. Principle number 6 that we're going to go ahead and talk about is how you describe your strategy session is just as important to how you do the strategy session, okay? Because the strategy session actually starts before the strategy session, okay? And so if you think about this, we said that the strategy session is where the transformation begins for the student even prior to joining your program. And then guess what? Now we're saying that the transformation, the importance of the strategy session begins even before the strategy session. So there's like pre-frame after pre-frame after pre-frame, because the mindset of what the prospect thinks is going to happen on the strategy session is just as important as what actually happens on the strategy session. So you might be thinking, why does that even matter? Because here's the thing. What they think will happen on the strategy session is actually going to influence if they're going to show up in the right state of mind or not. Do they actually show up in the state of mind that is going to facilitate change on the strategy session? And so it also makes a difference as to whether or not they show up excited and wanting to talk to you, or if they even show up at all, right? And so it's critical that when you are describing what your strategy session is and why someone should show up or not, it's something that by itself must sound amazing and valuable to the person. Otherwise, everyone has better things to do than waste their time in life and show up on a lame, bogus strategy session, right? If the person doesn't actually believe that the strategy session is valuable to them, guess what? We talked about why the human beings want to conserve energy, right? And so you want to make sure that you are facilitating that process so that way the person, the prospect, is willing to show up, they're willing to be vulnerable, they're willing to open up, and they're willing to ask for help. And so there is a setup involved with that. And this is another one of those things that's that recurring theme, that kind of beating the dead horse of that we're going to talk about in the upcoming modules as well. But remember, the purpose of this specific training is to be able to give you the practice to find your voice, and then those other details and advanced skills are what we're going to be talking about in the upcoming module. And so those are just 6 of the principles that I did want to go ahead and highlight for you inside of this specific training. And so as we kind of close out the principles section here, I want to kind of go ahead and summarize this for you in what we call the 3 rules of sales. Rule number 1, you want to make sure that you help the prospect make the decision that is best for them. Not the best decision for you, not the best decision for your bank account, the best decision for them. Rule number 2, what's best for them is oftentimes going to be outside of their comfort zone, okay? Because if it wasn't outside of their comfort zone, they would already have it. If they were already the person who could actually have what it is that they want, then they would already have it. And so rule number 3 is that the prospect is going to fight in order to stay inside of their comfort zone. Remember, we talked about change in action goes against human nature. And so you will need to actually coach them and have those hard conversations. And there's a specific way and a specific skill on how to do this so that way you don't end up in like a fight, right? You don't want to go ahead and go in there and have adrenaline and just fight people. You don't want to do that. That's terrible, okay? And so there are going to be advanced things that we're going to be learning and talking about in upcoming modules around that as well. Okay, so it does not matter who you are selling. It could be your husband, your wife, your kids, your friends, your family. I'm not talking about selling your transformation program. I'm talking about selling in general. It doesn't matter if you have an idea, a movie, a concept. Hey, honey, we want to go out to dinner at this place. That is all selling. And so it doesn't matter who you are selling and what you are selling. It could be health, wealth, relationships, connection to something greater, selling a movie, selling a TV show. You could be selling, hey, we want to go on vacation, whatever it is. The principles and the rules always still apply, okay? So this is very important for you to understand the principles behind all of this. And so with that being said, that is the first part of how to do an effective strategy session, which was covering some of the basic and foundational principles. The second thing we're going to go ahead and do is quickly jump into some of the tactical questions that often come up around the strategy session. Number one, how long should the strategy session take? The answer to that question is the conversation is normally around 45 minutes. When you're starting out, it'll probably go to around 60 minutes. And so you want to schedule about 60 minutes and then a little bit of a break for yourself if you need it, right? That's going to be very important because it is going to be very difficult to do multiple strategy sessions back to back, especially in the beginning. And then as you start to get really, really good at them, we're talking about like 30 plus actual strategy sessions, you'll be able to start knocking them out in about 45 minutes. And then once you get to about 50 to 100 strategy sessions under your belt, sometimes you can even get so good that you can knock these out in 30 minutes, depending on the person that you are talking to. Okay, so that's how you actually start to get really good at the skill of influence, persuasion, and sales. Okay, the next question that is tactical that I want to go ahead and answer is, what are we selling? Well, what we're selling is we're always selling, hey, you are going to be getting the skills in order for you to be able to become the person who can effortlessly have insert desired outcome, right? And so we've talked about this before. As RWPs, what we provide is curated information, okay? Because knowledge does not equal action. The cost of information in a world where there is unlimited information, the cost of information is time. It takes time to curate the information and actually make it applicable and actually be able to take action around it, okay? And so if everything was already on Google and YouTube, then how come there are still people out there that are having difficulty in their life? Why? It's because of the fact that even though the information is out there, it might as well not be out there because it's too much overwhelm. And so that is the first thing that we are selling, is curated information. Curated information that allows for actionable, applicable knowledge is what we are providing. The second thing is that we specialize in the becoming process. It's the behaviors that allow the person to become the person that leads to permanent transformation. Being able to permanently have that outcome, so that way they don't just lose the weight. They don't just get healthy for 6 months and then end up losing it. They don't just end up making a bunch of money and then end up losing it. They don't just end up having an amazing relationship for a period of time and then end up losing it. They don't just end up having purpose in their life and a connection to something greater and then end up losing it. The reason why is because of the fact that we are helping facilitate that entire process of becoming throughout the seasons of life. Okay, so that is the second question that I did want to go ahead and answer, is that even though there is scripting and we talk about the tactics and stuff like that, you want to understand the psychology behind all of it, which is what we are selling is the becoming process, okay? Question number 3, how long should my transformation program be? What is the pitch that I'm going to do? Well, right now, the scripting that we're going to provide is practicing 90-day transformation programs, and in the future, we can go ahead and help you practice selling 6-month and 24-week programs as well, okay? And then point number 4 that is extremely tactical, always be recording. If you want to improve on your sales calls, you want to get feedback, you want to learn how to get better, maybe you're in a sales slump, you want to record. The typical mark of an amateur salesperson is not recording their calls. If you fail to record your sales calls, you do not have permission to complain about having a low closing call percentage, because no one is going to be able to help provide feedback to you and you are not going to be able to learn. So it's going to be very important to record everything, and especially now that everything's going to be on Zoom, it's going to be extremely easy for you to be able to do the recordings as well. Okay, so that is the second piece that we wanted to talk about when we talk about how to do a strategy session, which was the tactical questions. And now the third piece, which is the part that we've all been waiting for, is the actual script explanation. Let's go ahead and actually walk through the scripting and the framework that is going to allow you to be able to actually practice and implement everything that it is that we are talking about. Okay, so very similar to the coaching call scripts that we went ahead and explained, you do want to make sure that you are zooming in and zooming out of the Google document so you can orient yourself, so that way you can actually see it better. And then the other point I want to go ahead and mention, just like we talked about in the coaching calls, is this script word for word? Do I have to say it exactly the same way, word for word? No, no, no. Remember, the scripts are just giving you the tools and all of the frames and the ideas and the questions that you can deliver. However, the truth is that you are going to have to change this depending on the situation. This is where the art of coaching came in when we talked about the coaching calls, and this is where the art of sales comes in when we talk about sales, influence, and persuasion, okay? The other part that I want to go ahead and address here when we talk about the scripting around this is we're going to go ahead and introduce to you the 5 parts of the actual strategy session script right now. And what I want you to know is that over the course of our 25 plus years of combined experience in delivering strategy sessions to prospects and having conversations to join our transformation programs, what we found is that we have come up with dozens of different variations of the strategy session script and framework that you are about to go through. And each and every single variation serves a different purpose depending on, hey, what is the promise that we are delivering? What is the market that we are delivering to? What is the price point? What is the offer? What are the deliverables? What is the style of the RWP? Some people sell in a different way than other people, right? As well as many other factors, okay? And so the scripts and the parts of the script that we are going to be going over in this specific training is just one of those variations, okay? So for the sake of practice, that is what we went ahead and did. We went ahead and included just one of those variations depending on all of these different factors, okay? And so for the sake of the practice and for the sake of what we are doing inside of this training, we're not going to be going over all of the different principles and all of the different structures and variations around it, okay? There are dozens around it that we're going to talk about in upcoming modules. However, this is why I just wanted to go ahead and introduce to you that just because it's scripted in the way that it is does not mean that that is the end all be all. It is just one of those variations that we are introducing you to. And then once you actually go through, again, remember that dead horse, once you actually go through that upcoming module of the game of sales, you will then understand the psychology behind how sales frameworks are designed, which will then allow you to be able to go out there and create your own sales frameworks for any situation, for any product, for any offer, and for any type of sales as well, okay? So for now, the practice strategy session script that we're about to go through is going to have 5 parts. Part number 1 is going to be the intro and the frame. Part number 2 that we're going to go over is the discovery. Part number 3 is what is called the promise. Part number 4 is what is called the pitch. And then part number 5 is what is called the commitment and the close, okay? So those are going to be the 5 parts of the script that we are going to go through together. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the script and the explanation right now. So we're going to go ahead and start off with part number 1, which is going to be the intro and the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and read off the script here and then go ahead and explain it to you right after that. So we go ahead and start off, say, hey, happy Thursday, Tina, how's it going? How are you? Where are you calling in from, right? And then the prospect goes ahead and replies from there. Now, this section right here is a building rapport without going too far out. We call it the straight line persuasion method. What that means is that you want to go ahead and have the beginning of the sale here, and you want to go ahead and have the end of the sale here of the strategy session, and you want to go ahead and build rapport, but you don't want it to go like, cool, hey, you know, how was your weekend? And then we go ahead and talk about fishing and camping, and now all of a sudden you're talking about your favorite camping equipment and you've gone so far away from the line. You want to go ahead and keep the frame and focus as close to the structure of the strategy session as possible, but you always do need to kind of veer off just a little bit in order to actually make sure that you are building rapport as well. So this is going to be kind of like a catch-all section here where it says building rapport without going too far out. So you want to build that rapport, but not going ahead and going so left field. Now all of a sudden you've forgotten why you're there, the prospect's forgotten why you're there. And so it's very important to build that rapport, but not by going too far out, okay? Then from there we say, cool, well, thanks for joining me for your strategy session today. I'm super excited for us to dive in. Are you ready to jump in and get started with our call? Prospect replies, do you have a pen and paper and something to take notes with today? Prospect replies, awesome. Thank you for getting that for me. So typically this is something, I'm going to break frame here. This is something that we go ahead and have the prospect prepare ahead of time when we have kind of like a pre-call homework, that kind of stuff when they actually schedule the call. Okay. And then from there, we go ahead and get back into frame. So let's start first by setting up the call and explain what you can expect here today. Does that sound good? Yes. Okay. So now this first section is the introduction and rapport. Okay. Now we're starting the call off with rapport because it actually helps relax the limbic brain and allows them to calm down and really feel open to talk to you, right? And so we talked about this in a previous module where we talked about what is rapport, why is rapport important, how do you build rapport? And so tonality and energy matters a lot. This is not in the scripting, and it's not possible for us to be able to script out every single conversation because rapport is not something that can be scripted. And so there are going to be maybe jokes, there are going to be in-betweens. That is not possible for us to script out. And so in the beginning, chances are that you are probably going to feel a little bit kind of nervous around this. You are not going to be the best at building rapport. But guess what? Just like everything else, you are going to get better as you go ahead and practice. Now, sometimes beginner, amateur students who don't know really what they're talking about will insist that, oh, this has to do with because I'm an introvert, I can't actually succeed at this. Because I'm an extrovert, I might be better at this. It has nothing to do with introvert or extrovert. Whenever anybody says that, it means that they don't really understand the definition of an introvert, and they're just using an identity statement, an I am statement, as an excuse for them not to put in the work to actually get better at it. Okay, so if you actually know what an introvert and an extrovert is, it has nothing to do with whether or not you're able to build rapport with something. Building rapport has nothing to do, I'm going to say it a different way. Building rapport has nothing to do with if you're extroverted or introverted. It's not what the words mean. Stop using it as a label in order to describe the fact that you just don't have the communication skills to be able to build rapport with somebody. Okay, so it's very important that I highlight that because I can't tell you how many beginner amateur students use that as an excuse. It's not an introvert or extrovert thing, it's a skill thing. And so we are going to have more trainings on this in upcoming modules for you to be able to learn this even more, but I want you to understand that you can get better at building rapport with other human beings. It's absolutely a skill, and skill equals knowledge times reps, and so you can get better at it. Okay, so that's the very beginning, which is the introduction and the rapport. After that, we go ahead and get into the pre-framing of the agenda. So this is how the call is going to go, Tina. We're going to spend the first half of our call here today going over some questions to find out what's going on with you right now, what are your current challenges, where you're having difficulty, and also where you want to go, right? What's stopping you from getting there? And then from there, I'm going to open up the space to ask you some questions if you have any. And then at the end of the call, we'll talk about the program and see if it's a good match for you. And then if it is, we'll chat about how we can get you rocking with it. And if for whatever reason it's not a good fit, I'm going to go ahead and potentially refer you somewhere else to somebody else who can go ahead and help you have a better solid game plan. Does that sound fair? Yes. Awesome. So real quick on here, what is pre-framing? It's really setting up the expectation about what is going to happen. So this further helps relax the prospect to understand what to expect, right? And we're also pre-framing the invitation to work together and the decision that's going to come at the end. And so none of that is a surprise. And so if you don't actually pre-frame this, then at the end of the close, at the end of the strategy session, it's going to feel like it came out of nowhere. And so we're being very straightforward and very honest from the very beginning. Okay, so that's pre-framing the agenda here in part number 1. And then finally, we go ahead and pre-frame the actual coaching element of this as well. Awesome. So Tina, before we dive into what we're actually going to go ahead and do here, I want to go ahead and get your permission. Do I have permission to coach you during this coaching call? Can I be your coach instead of just your friend? Prospect replies, cool, because I'm very straightforward and I might ruffle some feathers and I want to just make sure that you're ready for that coaching, okay? Does that make sense? Awesome. And so since we're limited on time, do I have the permission to interject in case we get off course as well? Prospect replies, awesome. So let's go ahead and hop right in. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we're setting this stage and getting permission that this is not just going to be a conversation where just like, hey, nice rosy dandy feels that we're just running with the sunshine. This is going to be sort of like a coaching conversation where we have to ask the hard questions to have the transformational conversations. And so we're going ahead and helping the student pre-frame that they are going to have to get out of their comfort zone, and they are probably going to fight to stay inside of the comfort zone, but that's okay because we're going to be able to be there to help them facilitate having those tough conversations. It's going to allow them to be able to make that change. Okay, so that is part number 1 in terms of when we talk about the intro and the frame. And then from there, we really get into the meat and potatoes of the strategy session, which is the actual discovery piece. Okay, so that's what part 2 is called. It's called discovery. Now, one important note I want to go ahead and mention here is that the sale is in the discovery. Whether or not you actually close the sale, whether or not you are actually able to go ahead and persuade the prospect, all depends on how effectively you do the discovery. This is why we say that the discovery is basically like the meat and potatoes, right? And this is really where the most amount of ditching the script is going to be so important, because of the fact that it's going to be different for each and every single person that you talk to. And so without an effective discovery, it's actually impossible to close the sale. And you're going to see exactly what we mean by that right now as we go ahead and go through the script and the explanation of the discovery piece. Okay, so the discovery piece is going to first start off by identifying the current situation of the prospect. Okay, so the scripting around this says, cool, so Tina, talk to me. What motivated you to take the time out of your day and schedule a call with us today, right? What would you like for us to be able to help you with? And so this is really just a general question to help start with the process of identifying the current situation or the current problem that the prospect is dealing with. Okay, so that is kind of the first part, which is identifying the current situation. And then once we have a better idea of the current situation, or once we've at least identified it at a very simple standpoint, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to explore the current situation. Okay, so what we do is we go ahead and verbally mirror. So we say, so what you're saying is that you're dealing with insert current situation. Is that right? And then you go ahead and ask deeper questions. You start digging. Can you tell me more about that? Can you tell me a little bit more? What do you mean by that? Can you tell me more, right? And so what are the poor habits that might have contributed to filling the current situation? You know, sometimes it might be stress eating for some people. Sometimes for others, it's going to bed a little bit later, right? Sometimes it's procrastination. What's your thing? How are your stress levels? And really, all of these are just kind of prompts, okay? I'm not saying that this is the actual scripting around this, but what we are saying is that you are going to have to utilize a lot of curious exploration, a lot of conscious listening, a lot of paraphrasing and verbal mirroring here to actually make sure that you are exploring and better understanding the current situation. You cannot be just satisfied with the prospect saying, oh, you know, this is what I'm dealing with. You want to basically understand it at a very deep level. The other thing that's very important here is that you want to make sure that you are holding the frame. What does that mean? It means that you are going to come across some prospects who might be talkative, some prospects who might talk a million miles an hour, right? And you might actually have to end up interrupting them and having them come back to focusing with you. Other people that you might talk to might just mumble and give you one-word answers. And then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to use a lot more of these curious exploration questions and some other ones that we're going to talk about in just a second to really get them to open up and give you more as well. And so this is really where the art of discovery actually comes in. It requires a lot of curious exploration. And like I said, this is not something that we can script out. This is really where you are going to have to do this on a prospect by prospect basis to really start to understand the principle behind section number 1 here was about identifying the current situation. And then the principle behind section number 2 is exploring the current situation, right? So you want to understand what those mean. And then that way you're going to be able to craft questions around it that might have to be off of the script that you are going to have to come up with on your own. So that way you can help better identify and explore the current situation, okay? From there, the next section is all about then identifying and exploring the desired outcome. So we went ahead and identified and explored the current situation, and now it's all about identifying and exploring the desired situation or the desired outcome, okay? So it's like, okay, cool, Tina, thank you so much for that. What's the outcome that you want over the next 90 days? Or, you know, another question you could ask is, if you could wave a magic wand and really get what you wanted in the next 90 days, what would that look like, right? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do, right? And so here, what we're doing is we're really starting to highlight and kind of identify what is that desired situation that this prospect in front of us actually wants, right? So this question is kind of starting that process out. And then once we've actually identified some sort of desired outcome, what we then do is we start to explore that desired outcome. Again, not something that we can necessarily script out exactly, but all of these are question starters that you are going to be able to utilize in order to really explore the desired outcome for that specific prospect, right? It's like, okay, well, what's important about that for you? What will having that do for you? What would that feel like? Now, I'm going to mention this, is that this is not like a verbatim amount of questions that you need to ask. It's not like these are the exact questions that you have to ask in this exact order. It really is going to change and tweak according to the person that you are talking to, okay? And so sometimes just by you asking one of these questions, it gets you to where it is that you need to go, and then therefore you don't need to ask the other questions at all. Sometimes you need to ask all of these questions plus more, right? And so you are going to have to feel according to what is appropriate market in that specific situation. And like I said, this is really where the art of influence and persuasion comes in. And a lot of it also has to do with the tonality and asking the right question at the right time. So all of this comes together to make up that skill set. And that's exactly why you're practicing your voice. You're finding your voice in this process. So that way you can get those practice strategy sessions in, and then you're slowly going to be able to start developing your skill set around influence, persuasion, and sales as well. Now, a couple quick notes on this that I do want to go ahead and also further emphasize on here is that you are going to notice the power of exploring the desired outcome, because you do need to keep in mind that this person that you are talking to, the person that you are having a strategy session with, is not a student yet, right? They have not yet experienced any of the amazing coaching calls that you are going to be delivering. All of the coaching calls that you have been practicing thus far in this module, you know how transformational they are and how much they allow your student to really start to be able to look forward in their life and avoid Niagara syndrome. You know that, but the prospect that you're dealing with right now does not know that. And so all of these questions are really the first introduction that they have to being asked questions about their life and helping them get clear around exactly what they want and why they want something in their life. And so for a lot of people, this is very much the first time that they have ever been asked these questions that actually allow them to step back and look at their life in this new way. And so this is why the strategy session is so powerful to your prospects. This is why the strategy session is such an incredibly powerful and valuable experience in and of itself. And so this is why when we talk about naming and describing your strategy session, it's so important that you are properly conveying and communicating the value that this strategy session provides by itself. It's very, very common that people will say, wow, I've never been listened to so incredibly carefully, right? Because the truth is that for many people, even their own spouses, their husbands and wives, don't listen to them as carefully and as focused as you are going to be listening to them inside of the strategy session, okay? The other piece that I want to mention here, I've said this many, many times already. I'm going to go ahead and say this again. The discovery piece is one of the most challenging parts of the strategy session script and framework because of the fact that you have to refine your skill around communication to really explore and decide at what point that your prospect has really felt your questions, at what point that you have enough ammunition, enough information, enough data that is going to allow the end of the strategy session for the student to be convinced that they are ready to make a change. And so you're going to see here that a lot of the rest of the strategy session, yes, it actually is quite scripted and it is going to be a little bit more easier to convey, but that is not something that is possible in the discovery because it is going to be different for every prospect that you actually talk to, okay? And then a couple quick notes in terms of the explanations for some of the questions that we went ahead and talked about above, okay? So questions that are around like, hey, what will having that do for you, right? Basically asking, hey, how would that desired outcome make a difference in your life? Because if you don't bring to the forefront of the prospect's mind how that desired outcome is going to actually make a difference in their life, they might know it subconsciously, but it's not something that is at the forefront of their mind right now. And so if you don't actually bring to the forefront of their mind, they don't actually say it with their own mouth, with their own words, why the outcome is going to be beneficial for them, when they get to the end of the strategy session, they are not going to value that outcome as much as they would have if they actually had said it out loud, okay? And so what you're doing here in this exploring the desired outcome section is what you're doing is you're really having them imagine how all of these things would be beneficial for them if they actually got the outcome, okay? So that's kind of the questions that are similar to that one right there. And then how would it feel like, right? And so with questions that are around feeling, what you're doing is you're really working to expand the prospect's emotion and emotional connection to what it is that they want and really start to connect their emotions to all of the implications of having that desired outcome, right? So you're really connecting what it's going to feel like when they achieve that which is that they want to achieve, right? And so this is where a lot of selling the future, not the features, selling the vacation, not the plane flight, that is what it is that we're talking about here, right? And then on top of that, what would be the best part of that, right? So with questions like this, we're starting to get the prospect's mind starting to dream and really get to a place of living in their desired outcome with us while they are talking to us. They're thinking, wow, I'm really starting to be able to think of that vacation. It's amazing. I want it so badly. Obviously, when I say vacation, I'm not saying that we're selling a vacation, but you get the point, right? This is the mindset that we want to cultivate with these questions that is getting them to start to dream and getting their frontal cortex really starting to dream with us inside of the strategy session when we are exploring their desired outcome. Okay, so that is this section when we talk about exploring the desired outcome. And then once we've actually gone ahead and done that, at this point, what we've done is we've actually gone ahead and identified and explored the current situation. We've identified and explored the desired outcome or desired situation. And now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're now going to go ahead and dig further in the current situation. And we're also going to start digging in terms of the bridge that is going to gap their current situation and their desired situation, right? So it's like, okay, got it, Tina. So you're currently at, fill in the current situation, and you want to get to insert desired outcome. So tell me, what's stopping you from being able to achieve this on your own? What do you feel is your biggest struggle with insert desired outcome, right? And then there's other questions that you can ask here as well. Hey, what's stopping you or slowing you down from having desired outcome right now? How long have you been struggling with that? Since you've been struggling with this for, X amount of years, which is this question, they answer this question, why haven't you taken care of that yet, right? So all we're doing here is really exploring the problems and challenges. And the other thing that you're going to notice is that this question right here is really much like a double whammy, because what's happening is that you're not only uncovering the problems and challenges of why they've been stuck, but you're also getting clarification on why they haven't been able to achieve this desired outcome on their own. Because here's the thing, in the science and the art and the psychology of influence and persuasion is that when somebody has to get out of their comfort zone, when the time comes for them to commit, it's very easy for people to get scared. It's very easy for people to say, I can just do this on my own, right? It's extremely common, especially when we talk about remote wellness and coaching and alternative education businesses and that kind of stuff. People say, I can just do this on my own. However, we are kind of just fixing that issue from the very get-go, because we obviously know that they couldn't get there on their own, because we're RWPs and we know that, hey, if they could have got there on their own, they wouldn't be talking to us, right? And so what we're doing here is we're getting them to admit, getting them to be able to walk into the fact that they are saying themselves, hey, I have not been able to achieve this on my own, and that's why I'm here on the call. And that's what they're doing by answering this question right here, okay? And so it is these questions that we are talking about here when we talk about problems and challenges. It is these questions that actually open up the space for us to come in and position our program as a potential solution to their problem. Because until they identify and say, hey, I have not been able to achieve this on my own, these are the things that I've been struggling with. This is the reason why I haven't been able to do this. I've been struggling with this for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Now all of a sudden there's a gap here that we've gone ahead and we're going to slowly start to expand this gap between the current situation and desired outcome that is going to allow the space for us to be able to position ourselves in our transformation program into this. And so really, in order to move forward from this section, what we're doing is we're really listening to see that they clearly state that they are unable to do this on their own. They're unable to achieve their desired situation, their desired outcome on their own because of the fact that they don't have the support, the guidance. They want to be able to do it faster. They want to follow a proven system, right? Something that is outside of them. Hey, it's not something that I can do on my own. I really do need that help. I do need that support. And so that is what we're going ahead and expanding, so that way they can go ahead and allow us to be able to position some sort of solution for them, okay? Because if they say that, yes, I can do this on my own, well, why are they on the call right now, right? So obviously they have something that is there. And so sometimes, depending on the prospect, that does mean that you might have to have a hard conversation. Some people who might be a little bit stubborn and don't want to ask for help, we say, hey, you saying that you can do this on your own? Well, it sounds like you don't need me anymore. Well, I guess we can just end the call right now, right? So that's kind of like an example of a hard conversation. You might not say it in those exact words, but these are all kind of scriptings that you are going to be learning more in the game of sales, as well as you're going to be practicing. This is going to come up organically for you as well when you're talking to different prospects. But obviously, that if they could have done it on their own, they wouldn't have shown up on the call. And so they do need the help. It's just a matter of the prospect being able to get coached to the point where, in the forefront of their mind, they are admitting to themselves that they also need that help, okay? The other point I want to go ahead and mention here is in terms of why we are asking the same question a lot of times in multiple different ways, right? Sometimes we'll ask the same question in like 2 or 3 different ways back to back without even pausing. And the reason for that being is because different people kind of resonate with different questions. And so sometimes different wording around the question helps really resonate with all sorts of different people. Again, this is one of those sales principles that is important to learn, and you're going to be able to learn this later on in upcoming modules as well, okay? The other point that I want to go ahead and mention here is not letting the prospect, quote unquote, off the hook. Because remember, having transformational conversations means having hard conversations. Sometimes prospects have difficulty opening up and being honest with themselves, never mind them trying to open up and be honest with a stranger, right? And so if someone doesn't give a clear answer to the exact question that you asked, then that means that you might end up having to repeat the question in a different way and dig deeper, so that way they can actually get the answer to the question. And so that means being able to ask, hey, tell me more about that. Can you tell me more? Can you explain more? What do you mean by that, right? And so asking curious exploration questions, these are just a couple examples, but there are many, many more, is that's important to not let the prospect off the hook. And so that means that you are going to have to start being okay with allowing other people to be uncomfortable, because the truth is that they haven't answered the question that you need in order to be able to move on with the framework and the strategy session script, okay? So that is the problems and challenges section when we talk about that. After that, we then go ahead and talk about what they have tried so far. Okay, so it's like, okay, cool, Tina, thank you so much for opening up to me about all of the things in terms of how long you've been struggling with this and all the problems that you've been having so far. What have you tried so far in order to fill in the desired outcome, right? What have you tried so far in order to lose 30 pounds? What have you tried so far in order to be able to have more energy so you can play with your kids? Whatever that might be, okay? And then, again, curious exploration. How did that go? How long was that? Why did that not work for you, right? How come you didn't stick to that? How come you're looking for something different, right? When it comes to that, what exactly do you feel you need? Have you ever tried working with somebody before? All of these are just example questions in which you are digging, hey, what have you tried so far? Let's go one by one by one. Hey, you tried the Atkins diet, and then you tried this diet, and then you tried a personal trainer, and then you tried this, and then you tried the pills, and then you tried the meals. Let's go ahead and discover everything. Don't stop until you've exhausted everything that the prospect has tried in order to be able to get to their desired outcome. If you do not exhaust that entire list, then what's going to end up happening is that when you get to the close at the end of the strategy session, the prospect is going to say, oh, I'm just going to go back to doing this because I tried that. What you got to do here in this section is that you got to get the prospect to admit that, hey, that thing that they tried in the past, it didn't work for them, and they have to be willing to be open to trying something different. Otherwise, they're going to make an excuse for themselves because they don't want to commit and they don't want to leave their comfort zone, and they are going to say, oh, I'm just going to go back and try doing that thing that I did in the past. Well, wait a second. Tina, you just told me earlier in the call that thing that you tried didn't work because of da-da-da-da-da. And so how are you going to go back to that thing when you purposely told me that it didn't actually work for you? Does that make sense, Tina? Yes. Okay. So we're going to have to try something different in order to get different results, right? And so that's why you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone and try something new, so that way you can get a different result. Does that make sense? Yes. So I'm kind of going off script and kind of ad-libbing here just so you understand. Is like, this is where a lot of the things that we're doing here in Discovery allow you to be able to remind the prospect of those things later on when they get uncomfortable with having to get out of their comfort zone and make a decision. This is why we do the Discovery. The Discovery is what allows us all of those data points, so that way we can help the prospect, the future student, get out of their own way and actually finally commit. Because remember, the mind doesn't like action and the mind doesn't like change. And so as a result, there is going to have to sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes not, but sometimes it is. And that's why we do the Discovery the way that we do, okay? And so then once we've actually gone ahead and identified the problems that we've talked about earlier, and we also identified all of the things that they tried in order to bridge this gap and they were unsuccessful, what we're now going to go ahead and do is we're now going to go ahead and really start to expand on the pain. We're really going to go ahead and start to really expand the distance between this current situation, desired situation, and really expand the situation that the prospect is actually in, okay? And what we do with that is we really start to widen that gap with the negative emotion side of things. Now, you might say, oh, isn't this manipulative? Aren't we taking advantage of the person? No, because like we talked about, is that emotion is the fuel for motivation. Unless the prospect brings to the front of their mind exactly the reality and the difficulty of the situation they are in, they will not have the pain in order to be able to say that I need to change, right? And remember, they need to make sure that what it is that they are focusing on is actually worth that precious energy. And so if they don't feel that this is that important, right? If they're not really in pain, they say, oh, you know what? This is not that important for me. Well, what makes you think they're going to take your program seriously? They're not. And so that's why we have to work on expanding that pain. So the importance level in the mind of the prospect in order to actually go out there and change is very high. And we do that via a lot of different questions, right? So we ask a big question, which is, hey, what negative impact have all of these struggles, right? All the struggles that they told you earlier, what negative impact have all of these struggles had on your life? How has this impacted your daily life? Tell me more. How has this impacted your energy? How has this impacted your relationship with your kids? How has this impacted your marriage? How has this impacted your work? Now, I'm not saying you're going to ask it like that. I'm not saying you're going to ask about all these criteria, right? But what you're doing is you're digging. How has it impacted your finances, your body image, your sleep, what you wear, how you feel about yourself, right? How has this impacted your relationship with food, right? How often do you have cravings, right? How are your stress levels 1 to 10, right? How is this manifesting in your body? What do you anticipate that these problems are going to cost you now and in the future if you don't actually decide to change, right? So you're saying that if you don't actually decide to change, that this could mean that you're going to have a heart attack in 3 years from now, and all of a sudden you're also going to be diabetic. You're going to have to pay thousands of dollars in insulin shots. Wow. How does that feel, right? And so what you're doing is you're really expanding on that pain so that way they can go ahead and really see the importance of their situation and why they need to do something different. This is absolutely critical, and I really cannot go ahead and emphasize this enough, because unless the prospect truly sees the consequences of their current situation and what that looks like if they continue down the same path without changing, they will not be motivated to change. This is the place where you might even get tears with some of your prospects, and that's okay. We shouldn't feel bad about this. We should understand that this is the part of the process that they need to go through, and this is the value of the strategy session that allows them to be able to get unstuck and make that commitment and make that decision to actually change, okay? Because when people start to realize, wow, because of these questions, I'm starting to realize how much my current situation is actually affecting all areas of my life. This is not only something that I'm like, oh, I can't fit into my jeans. This is actually impacting multiple areas of my life that I didn't even realize. And so this is extremely difficult for people to come to terms with, but it's absolutely critical for them to be able to make that decision to change, okay? And so how do you know that you've actually done a good job as you go through this entire discovery process? You'll know because of the fact that you've gotten enough pain out from the person that they actually understand that, hey, it's time for me to actually take action. If they're like, yeah, this is something that I kind of just looking around to see what my options are, it's like, okay, well, do you spend all day long just talking and getting information, or are you actually getting on a call to take action, right? And so you know that it's just an excuse and a bluff when they say, oh, I'm just looking for information. Well, no, you don't just hop on calls all day long just to get information, because that's kind of weird if you just collect information. You're collecting information to take action, right? And so that's kind of the purpose of why you're on the call. Yes. Okay, cool. And so what you're doing is you're collecting the pain so that way they can actually take the action. Because if you don't get enough pain inside of this discovery process, if you don't stay in the pocket, is sometimes what we call it, staying in the pocket of discovery and digging and exploring deeper to find out why this is important for them to change, then there is no motivation for them to change. When it comes time for them to take action and commit, they're not going to be able to do it, okay? And so like I said, these are all of these additional questions that we've gone ahead and provided for you. And what you're doing is you're really looking for the most difficult and hard questions to ask in order to really uncover if the person that you are speaking with is truly committed to making a change or not. Because if they are not committed to making a change, you're going to have them join your transformation program, and then they're not going to actually follow through. They're not going to follow the action steps. They're not going to be committed, and they're going to say, oh, it was your fault. It was the reason why, because your program sucked. It wasn't good. Well, no, it was because of the fact that you didn't bring to the forefront of the prospect's mind why they needed to actually take this seriously. And so I know for a lot of beginner and amateur RWPs who have a lot of false beliefs around sales, they think, oh man, I don't want to put this person into pain. But you need to look at the bigger picture of this and understand how all of this comes together, so that way you can actually be effective at transforming the lives of others, okay? And then finally, the other thing I want to go ahead and mention here, which is on that same accord when we talk about sitting with the pain, is that these questions are so powerful because it helps the prospect sit with the pain of their current situation. And so this is why it can be extremely uncomfortable for RWPs, because of the fact that they themselves are uncomfortable sitting with the discomfort of their own situations. Because when you are not somebody who's able to go ahead and tackle and look in the eyes your own problems, you have difficulty being in integrity and transparency with somebody else and asking them them to look at their problems directly in the eyes. And so this is another reason why remote wellness is such an amazing profession, is because it forces you to get uncomfortable and look at your own problems, because you are not going to be able to actually look somebody in the eyes and tell them that they need to look at their own uncomfortable situations and sit with the pain if you yourself have not done this in your own life. And so as you grow in your own self-growth, and as you start to become real with yourself, your own real situation, you stop making excuses for yourself, you actually be able to ask yourself these hard questions as well, then you are going to start to become less afraid of asking others those hard questions as well. Because you know that you are approaching this from a place of caring, right? This is the reason why we talked about the importance and the principles around caring for the other person. Because yes, if you are doing all of this with ill intention, if you are actually trying to hurt and manipulate somebody else, then it's not going to be good. You don't want to use these sales principles and these principles around influence and persuasion and sales to be able to manipulate people. You're coming at this from the foundational principles that we talked about. You're caring for the other person, not for them to buy, but for them to make a decision so that way they can actually take action. And so when you're actually going ahead and walking them through this, and you're walking them through how much it's costing them, okay? This is not a bad thing. It's helping them realize that they need to make that change. And so do not be afraid to ask these painful questions. You're helping the person in front of you make a life change, and that requires for you to be able to dig deep, not just surface level. And so that's why earlier when we said that if you really understand what sales actually is, you'll understand that it's one of the most noble professions that anyone can actually have, because of the fact that it actually allows people to make change in their life and be able to actually sit with those uncomfortable conversations that they need to have, okay? And so on top of that, it's also going to require for you to be able to call out prospects' excuses. And again, this is an advanced skill that we're going to talk about in an upcoming module, but I did want to just go ahead and mention that here as well, okay? So do not be afraid to quote unquote do the math with the prospect as well right there. If it's like, hey, let's figure out how much is this costing you for you to be able to stay where you're at right now? How much is it going to cost you in the future if you don't actually start working on this, right? How much is this going to cost you in medical bills? How much is it going to cost you to be able to fix these problems in your life in the future, right? All of this is what you can explore. And so I know I went ahead and went into detail with the explanation of this section, but it's so absolutely important for you to understand the importance of expanding the pain and the section that we're talking about here when we talk about properly, curiously exploring on the pain and why it's important, okay? From there, we go ahead and talk about the importance and the cost of not making a change, okay? So it's like, okay, so Tina, you're here, so obviously you want to make a change, but how important is this to you really? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most important, 1 being you could care less, how important is this for you to solve right now? And so if they answer an 8 or above, you want to say, okay, well, talk to me. Why is it an 8, 9, or 10, right? And if they say lower than a 7 or 8, well, you say, okay, well, that's interesting. Talk to me, like, why is this even potentially a problem that you want to solve, right? If it's a level 4 problem, if, for example, they said level 4, why is this even a conversation that we're having today then, if it's not that important for you, right? And so again, this might be because the prospect doesn't want to open up. They don't want to admit to themselves, never mind admitting to a stranger, that this is actually important for them inside of their life. And so what you're doing is you're kind of calling them out and say, hey, can I ask you an honest question? If it's just a level 4 problem, why not just stay where you are then, right? Why not just settle for what you have? And so you're getting them to be real with the importance of everything that it is that they just talked about, okay? And so as an explanation of this, if they answer an 8 or above, even though we know that they are taking their problem seriously, right? If somebody says, hey, this is a 10 out of 10, well, the reason why we're asking them, hey, why are you at an 8, 9, or 10 is because this is how we actually dig. This is how we get them to actually say out loud why they are at an 8, 9, or 10, okay? And then if they're lower than a 7 or 8, right, what we want to do at this point is really start to uncover, like, maybe this is not even somebody who is an ideal student or client. Why? Because if they don't have, after all of this, a big enough problem, a problem that is painful enough for them to take it seriously, then they're not actually going to want to commit to actually have this solved, right? And so like we said, this might be a point where you might actually have to call them out if that is the case. But if you've actually done the discovery, most of the times prospects are going to really start to admit that they do have an important problem that needs to be solved, okay? And so what's going to happen here as you start to do this discovery process properly is that the prospect is going to have at the front of their mind why all of what it is that you spoke to them about and what they went ahead and talked about is so important, right? There is going to be that urgency for them to change. And so if done properly, if they say, hey, 1 out of 10, how important is this for you? Some prospects might even say, hey, this is a 15, this is a 25, this is a 110 out of 10, right? And so that means that you've done a very effective discovery. And so that way the prospect is actually really motivated to solve this problem. And so that way at the end of the conversation, they're going to want to go ahead and be ready to make that commitment. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to 100% close, doesn't mean that they're 100% going to commit, but you've at least done a very good job at the discovery that is going to allow you to be able to go ahead and have a better rest of the strategy session from there as well. The other point that I want to go ahead and open your eyes to is that you're going to see that this entire discovery section, yes, it was the meat and potatoes of the strategy session, but you're going to see on here that the vast majority, pretty much 99% of everything that we're saying here, if not 100%, is all just questions. And so this is why what we were talking about earlier when we said that it's the questions that sell. It's the questions that are going to allow the prospect in their own minds to get convinced that they need to take action and make a change. And so that is why the questions are so absolutely important. And then as you start to close out the discovery, you go ahead and thank and then ask for clarification, right? So awesome. Thank you so much, Tina. I really appreciate you opening up and sharing with me. I know it's not always easy, but I really appreciate you doing that. I don't feel like I have any more questions. Is there anything else that you feel like we haven't covered that you feel like I should know before we actually continue on? And then you go ahead and let the prospect reply and clarify from there. And then from there, we go ahead and get into part number 3, which is the actual promise part of the practice strategy session. So again, I'm going to go through the script and then we'll go ahead and go through the explanation. So, okay, awesome, Tina. So based on everything that you've shared with me, I think that what we have going on here might be a really good fit for you because right now you're at insert current situation, and you want to get to insert desired situation. And so the process that we have used to help over 3,000 people just like you accomplish their health goals. And given the fact of where you are right now, I can tell that we can help you by giving you the support that you need in order to achieve those goals and maintain them for the rest of your life in about 12 weeks time. Would that be okay with you, right? Is this still a reasonable goal? You're not going to be upset with me if we go ahead and transform your life in about 12 weeks, will you? And then you go ahead and laugh. Prospect says, heck no, I would be so thrilled. I'd be so happy. Awesome. So where do you want to go from here, Tina? I can walk you through how our process works in helping you accomplish, insert their goals, but you tell me, where do you want to go, right? So you're kind of planting the seeds of you want them to be able to say, yes, let's go ahead and walk through that. That's where like 99% of prospects will say, yes, let's go ahead and walk through that right now, because now they're wondering, okay, this person has promised me that they can go ahead and change my life in X amount period of time. How are they actually going to do that? And that's going to take us over to the next section here, okay? And so this is really where part number 3, when we make the promise, is really now that we've identified the current situation, we've gone ahead and identified the desired situation, we've explored that, and we've really gone ahead and expanded this gap between this, right? And we've gone ahead and really started to be able to explore the pain. We are now going ahead and positioning ourselves as the solution to their problem. Now, I want to go ahead and mention something very important. It's not in the notes, but I want to go ahead and mention this because it's very important, is that from a sales ethics standpoint, this is where we said that if somebody is not a good fit, you don't want to promise somebody that you are going to be able to help change their life and help them get to where they want to go if you can't actually do it. There's going to be scripting around it when we get to the close and the commitment section of this that's going to walk you through exactly the verbiage that you can skip to after the discovery if it becomes blatantly obvious that this is somebody that you will not be able to help, if this is somebody that is uncoachable, if this is somebody that maybe you don't even want to work with them. You know that your transformation program can help them, but you know that this is somebody who is not really in the right mental headspace in order to actually even get help right now. And so we're going to be able to talk about that scripting. So you would actually not do part number 3 with the promise if this is somebody that you cannot actually help, okay? The other point I want to go ahead and mention about this is that the words that you use here in this section is what all of the discovery was really all about, right? Right now you're at insert current situation and you want to get to desired situation, right? These words right here are not as simple as just saying, oh, insert current situation, insert desired situation. The words you use here have to be carefully crafted to include a lot of the things that the student or the prospect went ahead and told you earlier from the discovery, right? Because the one who can describe the prospect's problem the best it is automatically assumed by the prospect that that person has the best solution. And so the words that you use here are going to dictate whether or not the prospect actually thinks that you can solve their problem, because you've actually defined their problem in the way that they think about it. And so I know it looks simple, but the words that you use here make all the difference in the mind of the prospect. And so if you actually properly verbally mirror and you actually properly match the prospect exactly, what you're aiming for is that the prospect thinks, once you've actually said those words, the prospect thinks, wow, this is amazing. This is exactly what I was looking for. Okay. Now, the other point I want to go ahead and address here is specifically this part where it says the process that we use has helped over 3,000 people just like you accomplish their health goals. Now, this is very important. The verbiage of this, it does not say we have helped over 3,000 people, right? The process that we have used has helped over 3,000 people. Why is that the case, right? Now, do you have to use that exact verbiage? This is completely up to you if you decide that you are comfortable to do that. However, this is the reason why we talk about the process and really the training that you are going through and how it really has helped over 3,000 people. Across all of the different clients and students that we have had over the last 10 years, we have helped well over 3,000 people achieve their health goals using the same process that you are going to be walking your students with. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with that and you don't feel comfortable saying that, you're more than welcome to change it. It's not going to make a difference at all in terms of the sale. It's not critical at all for the sale. Don't say, oh, boo-hoo, I can't say that, so now all of a sudden I can't actually use the script and all of this is terrible and, I have better ethics than you guys, and because I don't want to say this entire system's not for me. You didn't hear me carefully enough. I said that if you are not comfortable with that, you are welcome to change it because it won't make a difference at all. However, for those of you who are on the fence about saying something like that, I want you to remember what we talked about earlier when we talked about the system that RWA is providing for you, right? Beachbody franchise does not have to be able to create all of those testimonials again because they're using the same system that Beachbody HQ went ahead and actually created, right? If Beachbody franchise had to go ahead and do all of those testimonials again, it would be pretty silly. And so this is some of the value of being able to be a part of a bigger organization, of being a part of a bigger system, because what's happening is that this is kind of like franchise licensing model. There's a reason why you have the licensing agreement in place, is because you're able to go ahead and utilize a lot of the content, a lot of the system, a lot of the process. And so this is what allows us to be able to give you everything that you would need in order to actually provide this to your students. And so this is why we talk about over and over and over again, when we talk about the RWA over delivery promise, this is what we are talking about, is that when you joined RWA, the amount of value that you thought you would get compared to the amount of value that you actually got. We want to make sure through the RWA over delivery promise that the value that you get from Remote Wellness Academy will always far exceed your investment, period. And so this is a part of that is a perk of you being a Remote Wellness Academy student, that anybody who is not an RWA student can't go out there and say, oh, the process that we use has helped over 3,000 people achieve their health goals. They can't say that because they're not an RWA student, right? And so this is the value of you being a part of the Remote Wellness Academy. But again, remember, if you're not comfortable saying that for whatever reason, it is not at all critical, but it is something that you can go ahead and utilize if you felt comfortable doing so. And so this is the explanation of part number 3, which is the promise, in which we are actually positioning ourselves as the solution to the problem that the prospect actually has. And then from there, we go ahead and get into the next part, which is part number 4, which is the actual pitch, okay? And so we're going to go ahead and walk through the pitch, which is explaining the deliverables and kind of answering a lot of the logistical questions that somebody might have. So at this point, they're like, cool, I went through all of the emotional piece. I went through the discovery. I know I want to change my life. I'm ready to go ahead and change my life, but I need just a little bit of logic in order to be able to justify this decision, right? Now, there's going to be some prospects, a small percentage of prospects, who just the emotion enough is enough for them to say, hey, take my money. I want to join your program. I'm ready to go. Just the fact that you promised me that you can help me, I trust you enough. I'm ready to rock and roll. Now, it's not going to happen all the time. It's going to be like a very, 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 very small percentage that ever happens. It's kind of like a lay down sale, okay? However, for the vast majority of prospects, the pitch is going going to be what provides them the logical justification in their mind for wanting to go ahead and pull the trigger. Okay, so we go ahead and talk about here, we talk about 3 pillars overview. And so we're going to go ahead and go through the scripting around this. Okay, so cool, Tina. When it comes to making a permanent transformation, the majority of people, unfortunately, are taking the wrong approach, right? They take the approaches to do quick fixes, right? And so they go on these diets and they try these supplements. Now, could all of those things potentially work? 100%. But in our opinion, and I think you'll agree with me, Tina, is that it's a band-aid to the real problem, right? Now the prospect's nodding, right? And so they try all of these things, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, right? They get back to where they started because they didn't actually solve the problem, right? And so it's so frustrating for some people, right? And so this is why so many people yo-yo and then get frustrated and eventually quit. Does that make sense? Yes. And so there's a reason why some programs are really effective and others are not. So what we're doing, I'm going to break frame here to explain to you, is we're really going ahead and planting the seeds that some of the other programs out there are not as effective, which is true, right? And so now we go back into frame here. And so programs that get the best results in the shortest period of time include 3 things. I like to call these the 3 legs of a stool, because if you take any one of them out, the stool is going to fall, okay? And those 3 legs are the right system, the right support, and the right accountability. The right system means that the right steps are in the right order, and we're going to share more about the system in just a moment. The right support means someone to be able to help and encourage you when you feel stuck, and the right accountability is a kick in the butt when you're falling off track, because most of us know what to do, but we don't always do it. Right? Does that all make sense, Tina? Yes, that all makes sense. And so I'm going to break frame here to talk to you about kind of the psychology behind what we're doing here, is that now that we've gone through the discovery, we've gone ahead and made the promise, what we're doing here inside of the pitch is we're really educating the prospect, but we're doing it in a really vacation 30,000 foot overview, so that way they're getting the logic involved in order to be able to justify the purchasing decision that they need to make. And when we say purchasing decision, remember, don't get all like, hey, limiting belief on me here. Purchasing decision doesn't mean we're trying to manipulate somebody to buy. What we're doing is saying purchasing decision means being able to make an investment so that way they can actually commit to wanting to change their life, okay? And so that's what we're talking about here when we talk about the 3 pillars overview. And then from there in the pitch, we do is we go ahead and prepare the student for the pillars that we're going to go ahead and talk about, okay? So we say, okay, let's go ahead and now jump into the step-by-step process on how we're going to help you become the healthiest version of yourself and insert desired outcome, so that way you can have permanent transformation, okay? Let them reply. They say yes. Awesome. So do you have that paper with you? Let them reply. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down 1, 2, and 3 on the side of your piece of paper. And I want you to go ahead and give a little bit of space in between, so that way you can also take some notes, okay? Let them reply. Awesome. Cool. So let's go ahead and start off with pillar number 1. The first thing that we're going to be doing in that step-by-step program is focusing on the foundational skills needed for a health transformation, okay? So go ahead and write that down. Foundational skills for health transformation. That is pillar number 1. Prospect writes that down. This is where we're going to take a 360-degree approach to your health around nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress levels. We're going to figure out what exactly you need to be eating for your unique body type, because most people eat foods and then they wonder why they can't get the results that they want. And so we want to quickly find the foods that are optimal for you. On top of that, we're going to teach you how to be able to listen to your body and optimize your sleep so you're recovering well, and then optimize your stress levels so you're becoming the best version of yourself. Plus, figuring out the movements that can fit in your daily lifestyle that is sustainable for you and bring you more energy. Does that make sense, Tina? Awesome. Great. So what questions do you have on that specifically for me? And then you go ahead and answer any questions that they might have. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and jump to pillar number 2. Is that cool with you, Tina? Yes. Okay, cool. So the next thing that we're going to be focusing on is making sure that we turn the skills that you learned for transformation into lasting behaviors. Okay, so turning skills into behaviors. That is pillar number 2. Prospect writes that down. What percentage of people, Tina, do you think know what they need to do but never actually do it, right? So what percentage of people do you think need to lose weight and then gain it back within 6 months, right? Or insert common statistic around the prospect's desired outcome, right? You let them reply. So it's like 90% plus, right? Every time those people take action, eventually they end up falling back to their old habits. That's because they're missing this step. Does that make sense, Tina? They have the knowledge and the skills, but they're never actually getting it to stick because they have not yet become the person to be able to sustain those results by making it a part of their behavior. And so this is where we will take all of the skills that you learned in pillar number 1 and turn them into behaviors that will allow you to be able to have long-lasting change. Does that make sense, Tina? Let them reply. Awesome. So what questions do you have on that specifically for me? And then you go ahead and answer any questions. Now, I'm going to go ahead and break frame here. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you guys about this because remember, just like we talked about in the coaching calls, the dialogue is very important here, and just making sure that you are looking at the nonverbal cues of your prospect, making sure that they are following along with you. You might have to adjust your tonality, the speed that you're talking. You might have to adjust these words as well. Even though it's a little bit more scripted than it was in the discovery, you might have to be able to kind of tweak it around in order to make sure that the prospect is staying with you at all times. But I'm telling you right now, for like 80, 90% plus, these are the words that are going to work like magic. And you want to make sure that you're keeping your pitch extremely condensed. You don't want to be elaborating on this massive story and all of these pillars and going into the features. Remember, we're selling futures, not features. We want to sell the vacation, not the plane flight. And so what you're going to notice here, what we're doing is we're just really touching on the features just enough, but we're doing it in the lens. Everything is extremely 30,000 for overview. We're doing it in the lens of the vacation, kind of that future aspect of things, okay? And then we get into pillar number 3. The final pillar, Tina, is world-class support and accountability. Now, this is one of the most important one of them all. Why? Because you can have the best foundational skills for transformation. You can have the best behaviors around the skills, but if you don't have the support and accountability in that process, it never sticks. Because the only guarantee in life that we have is that life is not easy. But when those difficult moments come, you want to make sure that you've got the right people around you in your corner to help make sure that you are progressing towards your goals, right? And so one thing that I have seen time and time again is that motivation gets the ball rolling, but after motivation dies down, you need the support and the discipline to keep going to make sure that this is something that is a long-term sustainable thing for you. Does that make sense, Tina? Yes. Awesome. So do you want me to go ahead and walk you through how we're going to go ahead and deliver all of this to you? Prospect's going to say yes. Then you go ahead and go into the program deliverables. I'm going to get to that section here in just a second. But you're going to notice here, as we've gone through the pillars, you'll see that it is very, very, very high level. A lot of it is kind of like overarching motivational talk that is not going ahead and alerting the feature brain inside of the prospect. Nobody can disagree with what it is that we're saying. It's not like they're going to say, oh, I don't think that support is important. Oh, I don't think that making this into a lasting, sustainable behavior change is important. And so it's all just framed in the future. It's all about the vacation, but we're still answering a lot of those logistical and logical justifications, right? And then from there, we get into the program deliverables. And so we say, I want to go ahead and start off by saying that, Tina, this is not our first rodeo, right? So we're kind of showing that, hey, we know what we're doing here. We're kind of easing that limbic mind there. And so it seems like, you've tried everything under the sun, Tina. And I want to make sure that our program is the last thing that you do, okay? And we take a lot of pride in that. So one of the things that we ensure that is by having in-depth coaching calls around everything that we're going to be doing. So what that means is that every single week we're going to meet to help you actually accomplish, insert their desired outcome here, so that way you can learn all of the foundational knowledge that will help you not only for what you want today, but even 20 years from now, you'll be able to use what it is that you learn from these coaching calls. Does that make sense? Yes. And then throughout the week, you're going to have action steps, and this is really where the hands-on support comes in. So throughout the week, we're going to be able to connect and apply everything that you're learning in those coaching calls to your unique situation over the next 12 weeks. Okay, so that way you're not only learning the foundational knowledge, you're actually able to go ahead and make progress with it. Fair enough? Awesome. Now, on top of that, you'll have access to myself and the entire team 24/7 inside of the student community, plus other students who've gone through the same process that you can lean on for support as well. Does that make sense? Yes. And so by the end of this program, Tina, you will have everything that you need in order to become the person who can effortlessly have insert desired outcome. And so by the end of this program, you're not even going to recognize who you've become. You will become someone who can effortlessly insert the thing that they struggle with the most, that you'll actually enjoy, insert the thing they struggle with the most. And so this is how achieving insert desired outcome will become effortless for you. By the end of the 90 days, you're going to have different rituals, different habits, and you're going to feel totally transformed in your body. And what you're aiming towards is not just some quick fix diet, but rather making those changes that last. Does that make sense, Tina? And so you'll see here, I'm going to go ahead and break frame here to talk to you guys as RWA students here. You'll see when we actually even explain the program deliverables, extremely 30,000 foot overview, extremely high level, extremely making sure that we are not zooming in and getting into all of the nitty gritty features and all of that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, one important point I want to go ahead and mention here. Remember how I said that this is just one of the variations of the strategy session script and strategy session framework, depending on the offer, the price point, the style of the RWP. And so what I want you to know is that the program deliverables that we're talking about here are going to be something that are going to adapt based on the development of your product. In the start, your program deliverables might be simpler, right? And then as you develop more and more systems for support, you might add elements of the hybrid model. You're going to start to be able to add and subtract things in your program deliverables. So for the purposes of the practice strategy session, don't stress about this too much. Just practice it, find your voice, get into the routine of it, and then we'll be able to make adjustments as needed as we go forward from there, okay? And then to really close out the pitch section here, we're going to go ahead and talk about the guarantee. Now, this is another one of those things that we said. Remember, we said there are dozens of different variations of the strategy session script, right? This is not just a, hey, this is the framework, this is exactly how it has to be. There are many variations that do not include a guarantee. Whether or not you include a guarantee is beyond the scope of this specific training, okay? We want to make sure that we're keeping this tight because this training is going to be a longer one by itself. But whether or not you include a guarantee in your strategy session is something that we can also go ahead and discuss in the future as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and deliver the script so that way you can understand how it works, okay? But you're going to be able to practice it and kind of find your voice with it, and then we can go ahead and tweak it in the future as well. And so this is what it might potentially sound like. And so, hey, Tina, so we're so confident that by the end of the 90 days, you'll have the tools that you need to be able to have permanent transformation, that we actually have a guarantee. That if we decide to work together, we're going to put in writing and sign that by the end of your 12-week program, you will have all of the foundational knowledge and tools that you need to be able to have insert desired outcome forever, because you will know everything that there is to know about insert desired outcome, be able to keep the weight off or whatever their goal is forever for the rest of your life. Now, a verbiage around this, if you don't want to have such a strong guarantee, is that you could have, you're going to know everything that there is to know to become the person who can have insert desired outcome, right? So that's another variation of this that's potential as well. Let me go back into frame here. And so you're going to start to see transformation in your life that's going to allow you to be able to even start sharing with others, like your family and your friends, about how they can be successful with this as well. And so if you don't feel that you have had transformation in your health and life by the end of this program, we will continue to work with you for free until you do. Guaranteed. And you wouldn't be upset with that, right, Tina? I just want to make sure. And that's just a quick joke that you can throw in there, right? And so here's the big thing I want to go ahead and mention with this, okay? Do not get married to this scripting and this wording, okay? Some variations of sales frameworks have guarantees and some do not, okay? It will not make or break the sale. It will ease the ability for the prospect to make a decision, but it does not make or break the sale, okay? For many, 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 many years, we did not have any guarantee. So it is not that big of a deal. I just wanted to go ahead and include it in here for you to be able to practice the principle and start getting your gears turning about what that might actually look like and the verbiage around that as well, okay? And then in the future, we'll be able to go ahead and tweak this depending on your situation in your remote wellness practice and what it is that you choose to actually offer, okay? So remember, for the sake of practice, don't get married to this and all of a sudden, start beating yourself up because you think you can't offer a guarantee, okay? So just understand, practice it, and then we'll be able to take it from there. Beautiful. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and now get into the next part of the strategy session framework, which is actually going to be part 5, which is the commitment and the close, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about the commitment and the scripting around this, okay? So Tina, I know we went through a lot and I know that was really quick, okay? So we're going to take a little bit of a pause here, okay? So talk to me. What's resonating with you the most about this system that we talked about, right? What do you feel about the process specifically? Prospect responds, right? What is the best thing about the process that you love the most? Prospect responds, right? You can add some questions in here as well. And so then if the prospect doesn't really answer with a lot of certainty, you can throw in a question on here that's like, okay, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, terrible and 10 being amazing, how do you feel about the process specifically, right? If they're less than a 9 or a 10, then you want to ask them, hey, what makes you a 6, 7, 8, or 9, right? I completely understand. I appreciate you bringing that up. And then you can go ahead and address limiting beliefs, right? So remember, we haven't even asked them to commit yet. What we're doing is we're going ahead and fleshing out any kind of resistance, any kind of questions that they might have that prevent them from actually committing. And so by asking this kind of question, what we're doing is we're bringing to the surface, I'm not that sold on the process yet. I'm not really that convinced that this is that big of a deal, right? Hey, you know what? This is like a 6 or a 7 for me. And so we're addressing those limiting beliefs as obstacles prior to us being able to actually get to the close, okay? And then finally, once they answer that, once they kind of go through the limiting beliefs, you let them reply. Last question, Tina. Why should we take you on as a student, right? Why would you be a good fit for us to be able to work with you? And so you're going to see here that we're in the explanation, I'm going to go ahead and explain this here in a second, is that what we're doing here is that we're really going ahead and helping the prospects sell themselves to us as to why they would be a good fit for the program. And so what this does is it really helps keep the frame that the program is the prize and the prospect is the one that has to prove themselves worthy of it. And so this allows us to not chase them. It allows us to not be money hungry because, hey, we're ready to turn people away if they're not good fits for the program. And so if you don't feel like you are committed, if this doesn't feel like this is a program for you, then by all means, this is not something that you need to join. Now, I'm not saying that you say that to the prospect, but that is the mindset that you have. Remember, all you're doing is you're just helping them make a decision. It's not about trying to force them to buy with you or anything like that, okay? So very, very, very important to remember that, okay? Then, thank you for breaking all of that down for me. Remember, this entire process is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The process works, and this is why the system has transformed so many lives permanently, okay? So as long as you're willing to put in the work, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to succeed with this, Tina. Is that fair? And then the prospect goes ahead and responds. Now, the next thing, Tina, that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and walk you through the onboarding process, and then we're going to go ahead and go over the investment and figure out how to make it work for your budget. Does that sound fair? Awesome. So you're going to notice on here, this is what's called kind of like an assumed close, in which we are already assuming that the prospect is going to say yes. It's a little bit of a psychological influence and persuasion tactic in which we're really helping the prospect be able to think about that commitment as if it's already been made. And then all we got to do is really just figure out how to be able to make it work for their budget. Okay. So that's another important piece that's on here. Now, in terms of the explanation that we had up here as well, you'll see that in this section regarding commitment, before we actually get to the close, we are getting multiple layers of commitment from the student or the prospect, right? What's happening is that first we're getting a little bit of a temperature check, okay? A temperature check or a pulse check is really just seeing where their mind is at after going through the pitch. And then this is really where you might end up having to ditch the script to really start to address the limiting beliefs that the prospect might have, in which they don't actually see the value of what it is that you are providing. This might be somewhere that you have to kind of ditch the script for that. And then of course the prospect actually proving themselves worthy of the program. We've already gone ahead and talked about that piece of the commitment as well. So with that being said, what we do then is after the commitment, we then go ahead and lightly talk on the onboarding, right? We've talked about this in the past, that this is what they call future pacing, right? What we're doing is we're easing the student's mind of what will happen when they actually join, right? So that way, when we actually discuss the options of them joining the program in just a second, they aren't going to be scared about what's going to happen next. And so what this does is it alleviates pressure and noise from the limbic mind about having to make a decision, right? So the scripting around this goes, so once you come on board, Tina, we're actually going to go ahead and give you some homework. We're going to have an intake form to get a better understanding of your schedule and your needs and where we can go ahead and provide the most support immediately. And then we're going to go ahead and schedule our first in-depth kickoff coaching call where we're going to go ahead and map out all of your goals and what needs to happen with those step by step, and then all of the action steps that you need to do in order to be able to set you up for success to be able to get to desired outcome. Does that make sense? Awesome. And then from there, we then go ahead and go into the close. Okay. So the close is basically where we're laying out exactly the time to be able to go ahead and make a commitment and make a decision. Now, for this, there are a couple different options. Okay. Now, there are options here because of the fact that you are going through certification right now. And so option number one is if you are dealing with a practice student. Option number two is if you are dealing with a paid student. And then option number three is if you're dealing with somebody who is not a good fit. So let me go ahead and walk you through what it would look like if you were working with a practice student. So what you would say is awesome. So we have just a few openings for taking on new students into the program right now. And so here are the next steps, and here's what the next steps would be. So since this experience is going to be complimentary, there are going to be 3 things that I ask from you in return. Number 1 is commitment, meaning that you must take this program seriously. Why is this important? Because those who pay attention. And so when someone is getting something for free, it's easy to blow it off. And so are you willing to commit to showing up for each coaching call throughout this program and giving it your all? Yes, no, maybe so. You go ahead and get the answer from there. Number 2, a referral. If you find this experience valuable, would you be willing to refer me to someone you know who might like to have an experience like this? Okay, yes, no, maybe so. Number 3, share a story, okay? Is that sharing your results and successes from this experience would be really inspirational to others. If you have results and successes that you are excited about, would you be open to me sharing those with other prospective clients? I'll create a story based on what we do, and then you'll be able to approve it. And so that way it's going to be very easy for you. Okay. So these are some of the options that you can walk a practice student through. Now, in terms of certification requirements, in the upcoming module titled Launching Your Remote Wellness Practice, where you actually finish out your certification in module 6, you will be required to take 2 real students through the entire 90-day transformation program and submit recordings. Okay. So in that upcoming module, we will further expand on some of the options that you can take your practice students through with different donation and investment options. So it doesn't always have to be complimentary. It can also be for an investment amount, so that way they take it more seriously, but we'll walk through some of those other things in the upcoming module. But for the sake of practice right now, you can go ahead and just practice the version that we have on here, okay? And then after that, we go ahead and get into option number 2, which is a paid student. Now, for some beginner RWPs, this option might feel scary. This is going to be something that we help walk you through even more, so that way you can be more and more prepared how to be able to handle a paid student. And a lot of the other logistics in terms of the email and the onboarding and the agreement and how to be able to process the payment, all of those things are going to be coming up in the next module where we actually talk about putting everything together. But this is a scripting that is important for you to be able to practice. While for other RWPs, this option is going to feel very easy and easy for them to be able to run with as well. So let me walk you through the scriptings. Okay, so awesome. So we have just a few openings for taking on new students into the program right now. And so here's what the next steps are. And we can actually do these next steps together on the call, and it'll only take 3 minutes or so. Okay, so the investment to help you insert desired outcome and help you maintain and create a sustainable lifestyle change forever over the next 12 weeks comes out to be a one-time investment of insert whatever price point there, $3,600, right? And so there are 2 investment options. You can invest in full now and save, which is the best deal. Or if you prefer, you can do a monthly payment plan. Either way is totally fine. Which option do you prefer? And then you just shut up. Okay. Now, a very important note on shutting up, we talked about this in a previous training as well, is that after you present the price to the potential student, you do not want to say a word. For a lot of beginner RWPs, when you actually get to that point of having to present a price, a lot of beginner RWPs are uncomfortable. And so they just blabber on and on and on and on to be able to kind of get out their own uncomfortability. Okay. The truth is that you need to just shut up and let the prospect sit with their decision. And this is going to be more of what we talk about in an upcoming module with the game of sales, okay? And then also a note on pricing. Don't worry about the specific pricing for the sake of these practice calls. There are going to be entire trainings on the details of pricing in the upcoming modules, because what your price is going to be has a lot more to do with the details and the variables and the variations. So it's not a cookie cutter for every single person. We do have some recommendations, but a lot of this is going to depend on your own confidence, your own conviction, your own experience. So a lot of it is variable as well, okay? So that is going to be option number 2 that you are going to be practicing for the practice strategy session. And then finally, option number 3 is that if the prospect is not a good fit, right? So wherever they are in the entire strategy session framework, if they are not a good fit, then you would just come over here and say, hey, I wouldn't be the coach that you would expect me to be if I told you that working with me was the right fit for you right now. And so if you're going to invest your time and your energy and your resources, then it should only be in the program or an experience that is going to be the best for you. And so based off of everything that I've heard you say, the resource that I recommend for you right now is, and then you can go ahead and recommend for them a resource if you have it available. If not, you can just say, hey, this is just not the best program for you right now, period, right? That's it. And so if the prospect is not a good fit, all you do is you just go ahead and thank them for showing up, and you recommend whatever resource that you think would be the best for them at this time, okay? And so those are the three options when we talk about the close. We talk about option number 1, option number 2, and option number 3 that you are going to be able to practice for the practice strategies. And then depending on whatever option kind of takes place here, what you then do is you process payment and you onboard the student. So you go ahead and reassure them, hey, this is going to be amazing for you, Tina. I'm super excited for you to get started with your 90-day transformation program. You made a fantastic decision. Let's go ahead and schedule that kickoff coaching call together right now. And then you go ahead and schedule that call using the CRM software that you get access to in the upcoming module, okay? And then over here, you can go ahead and do some small talk while processing the payment. And then we're going to go over how to actually send the invoice to your students so that way they can process the payment in the upcoming module as well. Now, a quick note in terms of objection overcome, okay? What if the student says, hey, I need to think about it. Hey, I'm not sure. Hey, I got to talk to my husband. I got to talk to my spouse. Hey, I'm not sure this is right for me. All of the other things that a prospect might say because they're scared to actually commit. This is going to be something that we go ahead and talk about in the Game of Sales module. Right now, again, for the gazillionth time again, you want to just practice what it is that we have right now with the scripting again and again and again. So this is like level 1. And then after that, we can go ahead and help you progress to level 2, level 3, level 4 as you go ahead and increase your mastery of these specific skills, okay? And so with that being said, this has been this specific part when we go ahead and talk about being able to go ahead and have the commitment and the close. And then from there, this is not a specific part, but after they have committed, you go ahead and number 1, finish the onboarding. So something along the lines of, hey, awesome, I went ahead and sent over to you your new student agreement to you via email. Can you go ahead and check and let me know if you have received that, please? Awesome. Do me a huge favor. Go ahead and sign the agreement by the end of today so that way we can go ahead and make sure that we go ahead and create your student record on our end. Can you do that for me? Yes. Awesome. Now, again, remember, we're going to go over all of the automations and the onboarding and the tech and all that kind of stuff later on. For now, just practice the wording and going through the motions. And then you might go ahead and potentially give them an action step, right? So between now and our first coaching call, Tina, I invite you to, and then give the student a simple action step based on what it is that you learned in the strategy session conversation to help them get started. Hey, do you have any questions for me before we complete today? No? Awesome. I'm super excited for you. I can't wait for you to go ahead and get started. You've made a fantastic decision. As you are closing out the conversation, it's very important that you go ahead and you reassure them as much as possible. Why? Because most people that you deal with, it is going to be a very, very, very big decision and something that is very nerve-wracking for them in order to make a decision like this, right? They're vulnerable. They just went ahead and made a decision that they're not sure of. And so they need the reassurance that they have made the right decision. They need that validation, right? Because buyer's remorse is a real thing. And so this is what we call the keep them hot sequence, right? Keep them hot means that keep them engaged, keep them warm. And so it's not like, okay, cool, we close the conversation and then all of a sudden we just meet them on the coaching call. There's going to be emails, there's going to be text messages, there's going to be automations, all of that. There's going to be onboarding, intake form, all of that is something that allows the student to be engaged so that way you have a very low back out percentage. A back out percentage is what percentage of people said they were going to commit and then all of a sudden they decide to back out. Back out is a function of not having a proper onboarding sequence in place. But again, this is going to be something that we go ahead and walk you through in upcoming modules so you can have a lot of this automated, and we're going to go ahead and provide you all of the softwares paid for you so that way you can go ahead and do this successfully as well. And so that really is the end of the how to do a strategy session section when we talked about, hey, we're going to go ahead and talk about the principles, we're going to go ahead and talk about the tactics, and then we're going to go ahead and go through the scripting. This is what we went ahead and talked about all A to Z on how to actually deliver your practice strategy session. Now, as we start to close out here, and I want to go ahead and give you instructions on exactly how you are going to be doing your practice strategy sessions and how many partners you're going to have for that, I want to go ahead and quickly touch on some of the common mistakes that beginners make with the strategy session, okay? The number one thing is just not having self-belief, because selling is about caring. And so if you yourself don't care or believe in what it is that you are selling, no one else is going to believe you. And so if you struggle with self-belief or the value of what it is that you are providing, you want to make sure that you are masterminding with other RWA students. You want to jump on the coaching calls or the office hours, get help, because you will be unable to sell until you actually believe in the value that this process has to provide, okay? The second common mistake is treating the strategy session as a coaching call. I know you've gone ahead and started to be able to find your voice in the coaching calls, but the voice that is specific to strategy sessions is different. The strategy session is not like a regular coaching call where you go ahead and give information and then make recommendations and action steps. A strategy session is about helping the potential student get unstuck and helping them make a decision to take action towards their desired outcome, okay? And so although sometimes there can be coaching involved, the strategy session is not about coaching them primarily, okay? And then common mistake number 3 is thinking that they are going to be amazing at doing this from the beginning. Now, I know I already discussed this, the nail in the coffin, but I want to go ahead and emphasize this another time. For most people, it takes walking someone through the strategy session script and the strategy session framework dozens of times, if not hundreds of times, before they can really start to be able to get to the point of conscious competence with the framework of the strategy session. So just walk into it expecting that and understanding that and being okay with that. And so that way you're going to be able to beat yourself up less as you are going through the process of learning and getting better with the strategy session. A couple other points that are important to keep in mind here. Now, this is a reminder in terms of the pre-call ritual as well as organization. I know we haven't touched base on this since our coaching call times. However, just as it is important to make sure that you have a pre-call ritual and are showing up in the right headspace for your coaching calls, it is absolutely critical that you are doing that for your strategy sessions as well, because it is a lot of the similar skill sets in terms of conscious listening and making sure that you are able to go ahead and hold space and be able to have that distance so that way you can observe the prospect and not get too wrapped up in what it is that they are saying, okay? So that is the pre-call ritual, very important to go ahead and highlight over here. And then of course, also on top of that, organization. It's going to be extremely critical for you to make sure that you are taking notes. Now, how do you take notes? It doesn't really matter. Some people prefer pen and paper. Some people prefer typing. Some people prefer, whatever. It doesn't matter how you take the notes, but you want to make sure that you are taking the notes because that is going to be extremely valuable for you as you are going through the strategy session process. Because by the time you get to the pitch and the commitment and the close, you're not going to remember all of the detailed answers that the prospect gave you in the discovery. So you want to make sure that you are writing those things down. Okay. So with that being said, what we want to go ahead and do now is we want to go ahead and talk about the strategy session call practice. Okay. So in the same way that we had coaching call practice, you are going to have strategy session call practice as we start to close out module 5 here. So that way you can actually start to find your voice that is specific to the strategy session. Now, the difference here is that unlike the coaching calls, you're actually going to be practicing the same strategy session framework, and you're actually going to be practicing this with 3 other students, okay? I know in previous trainings we might have mentioned that you're going to be practicing it with 1 student. We're actually going to be practicing it with 3 students. So unlike with the coaching calls and how you actually practiced 3 coaching calls with 1 student, it's kind of like we're flipping it here, okay? We're practicing the strategy session with 3 different students. You're going to have partner number 5, partner number 6, and partner number 7, okay? Minimum 3 recordings are a requirement for this module. You are more than welcome, more the merrier, especially with the strategy session. I'm telling you, especially with the strategy session, we went ahead and highlighted how it's the most important skill for an RWP to have. If you want to go ahead and practice multiple strategy sessions, like over and over and over and over again, it is going to be so extremely valuable for you to be able to do that with other students in module 5. And then in module 6, you're going to then be able to go ahead and start experimenting and doing this with test clients and test students as well. Now, in terms of the other directions of why practice calls are important, I'm not going to spend any time on this because at this point you understand that knowledge without practice is meaningless. We learn best when we teach. And the reason it's so important is because you get to experience what it's like to be on the other side, as well as the mind does not know the difference between something that is vividly imagined and something that is real. And so this is why practice is going to be so absolutely critical for you to do, not only for the coaching calls, but also for the strategy session. Now, in terms of the instructions for this, of course, you are going to be following the same exact step-by-step of how to practice strategy sessions, the step-by-step instructions, okay? Just remember, you are going to have 3 different partners inside of this strategy session training. And then a couple important notes. Of course, if you have not met your RWA partner before, you can go ahead and introduce each other, spend some time before you start recording. You can go ahead and make it real or semi-real. You want to make sure that you are giving somewhat of a challenge to your partner and allowing them to really practice different elements of the strategy session framework, okay? And then the instructions. Make sure you go ahead and do the pre-work. Make sure you read the strategy session out loud and do it over and over and over again. Do not try to wing this. You need to be able to practice this and get better and better and better at it. Then you're going to go ahead and follow the exact same instructions in terms of the 60-minute timer, respecting the student's time, and all of that you are going to be doing for the strategy session as well that you are so used to from the coaching calls, okay? And then after you've gone ahead and done that with one partner, you're going to go back to the student community post, you're going to put your takeaways and your recording, and then you're going to go ahead and partner up with another student for the strategy session as well, okay? So that way you are able to go ahead and practice with different students. The other important note that I'm going to go ahead and mention here is that you can go ahead and partner up with the same students that you went ahead and did with the actual coaching calls. And so there is some overlap allowed here. And the reason for that being is because the coaching calls are so different than the actual strategy session. So you can actually go ahead and partner up with the same students as well if you need to do so. Okay. Now, a final note on this, just as I do in every single practice call, I want you to know that I know for a fact that you are going to do great because of the fact that this is what practice is for. Practice allows for progress. And as you go ahead and put more and more reps in this process, you're going to go ahead and learn more and more, and you're going to be able to go from conscious incompetence to conscious competence, and then eventually unconscious competence. And so I'm super, super excited for you to go out there and absolutely crush it with the practice strategy session call. In terms of your engagement question for this specific training, we would love to hear from you in terms of, hey, what were your thoughts about this training? You really started to go ahead and see as we go ahead and reverse our way to the beginning of this entire process. You went through the coaching calls, you're starting to see the strategy session. What are your thoughts on this training? What did you like and enjoy about this training? What were some of your biggest takeaways or ahas? And honestly, now that you're starting to see a small sneak peek of the strategy session process, how a student actually joins your program, is it starting to click now how this entire system actually works? Now, I know we're still going to go ahead and have trainings that are going to come up with in terms of how do you actually get people to schedule strategy sessions? How do you get people who are not your friends and family? How do you get people who you don't know, strangers, to actually go out there and book strategy sessions with you? Don't worry, that's coming, right? Right now we're finding your voice and doing the practice calls. But are you starting to see how this entire system is starting to click? Let us know. We would love to know your thoughts, and let us know so that way you can go ahead and cement what it is that you are learning from this as well. Okay. In terms of your action steps for this specific training, make sure you go ahead and watch and study this training in full. Make sure you go ahead and complete the engagement questions for this training, the ones that we just went ahead and talked about above. Make sure you actually save the appropriate Google documents inside of the appropriate Google Drive folder for this call. You're going to notice that it's going to be company folder, and then 2 is going to be sales. And then after that, you're going to go ahead and make a folder called strategy session. So that same framework that we went ahead and put together when we were first starting this module is also going to be applied over here. Make sure you go ahead and comment your availability on the strategy session student community post. You want to make sure that you go ahead and reply to another student's availability, have the DM conversation with them, practice. If you have questions, let us know. Conduct your practice call with your partner, upload your practice call to YouTube. Make sure you go ahead and comment the recording and your takeaways. Now, please don't leave like a 2-sentence takeaway. Really go ahead and evaluate, how was my performance on this call? How could I have gotten better? What can I use help with to get better? Really have proper takeaways. It's going to be very important. And then finally, make sure you go ahead and repeat these previous steps with 2 more partners. So you want to have a total of 3 partners in which you are actually doing the practice strategy session with. Okay, so this has been the strategy session explanation. I'm super pumped for you to go out there and get your practice reps in. With that being said, this is Coach Yasin checking out, and I will catch you inside of the next training.